see much rainfall today in New Orleans, let's say. We could still see some heavy rainfall tomorrow morning. So we're going to have to get through the next 24 hours or so before we give the all clear on this thing, of course, and we're far from seeing it being over. I mean, the storm hasn't even made landfall yet. It's still kind of meandering down there off the coast. As we go throughout Monday morning, there's that band I'm talking about, just kind of sitting over the area, and then it will eventually lift to the north. So the highest storm surge values continue to be from coastal Mississippi down towards Plaquemines Parish. And hey, Chris or Dave, can I get one of y'all? I don't think that they can hear me. Hey, Dave or Chris, can I get one of y'all to hit max 1? I want to show the storm surge that we're seeing over in South Mississippi. If you've got it pulled up, if not, no biggie. Yeah, so we continue to talk about this surge, thanks. And it is still coming in. Now, high tide has happened or is happening right now in South Mississippi, and the tides haven't dropped is what I'm trying to say. And that's because we still have that strong onshore flow with the center of the storm still sitting to the southeast of Mississippi and towards St. Bernard Parish. So you're continuing to see these strong winds push in this water. And you can see here, this is coming quite a bit even over the past hour, even though high tide has really already happened here. So just to put this in perspective, there's a wall right here that sits maybe 2 or 3 feet tall. There's a beach right here that sticks out probably 20, 30 feet. Then you start to get into the Mississippi Sound. Of course, this is kind of a fishing pier. And then this goes over towards the Gulfport Harbor, if you're familiar with the area. So this has already come in quite a bit. Also seen plenty of reports of water getting on Highway 90 once you get closer to Long Beach, past Christian. You go into Bay St. Louis, of course. We did that live shot. Those areas typically go underwater. But parts of Highway 90 in Long Beach and past Christian sit very low. And when you get inundation of 3 to 4 feet, those locations start to go underwater. We're seeing the same thing towards Shell Beach, seeing inundation continuing to go up. Gauges there were showing getting close to 6 feet above normal tides with 6 feet on top towards Shell Beach. So that was about 30 minutes ago. We saw that update from the National Weather Service. So the surge continues to come in, although high tide is happening right about now for some locations. We're going to continue to see the strong onshore flow in these areas going into Lake Borgne, maybe towards parts of Lake Catherine is where you're going to start to see some of the strong or the highest storm surge as we go throughout the afternoon. Still 1 to 3 feet there in the lake, and then lower surge values as you go towards the coast of Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes, just simply because you're starting to see more of an easterly to northeast flow.
All right, thanks very much, Peyton. And it is now almost 2 o'clock. We've got some breaking news, and that is the city of New Orleans has called for a voluntary evacuation order for areas outside of the levee system, and that would include Venetian Isles, Lake Catherine, and Irish Bayou. All of those areas traditionally have issues with high water. So with the storm surge forecast of 3 to 5 feet, that hasn't changed. They are, as a matter of precaution taking, asking for folks, if you feel unsafe, just evacuate the area. And you have been wonderful in Venetian Isles, sharing pictures of what's going on in your backyards. It looks like the lake there lapping up against your back doors, and we know that that does sit on the water. Thank you for these pictures. These were actually taken earlier this morning. It is now 2 o'clock. If you can safely do so, we would invite you to send us your pictures. Just text them to us at 529-4444 with the time and the location. We'll be right back. It is right now 2 p.m. and we are bringing you our continuing coverage of Tropical Storm Cristobal.
That's right. Our Devin Bartolotta is in the studio talking about the latest information we're getting on this storm, and new information keeps coming in. Let's get over to Devin with what you need to know.
Sheba, the storm here has slowed down, moving about 5 miles per hour. More than 1,000 homes in Slidell are without power. That's a new outage that's being reported by CLECO. It's in the area of Gause Boulevard and 10 and the surrounding neighborhoods there. Even as rain continues to come down, the city has continued to clean catch basins. Roadwork NOLA posted these photos on Twitter earlier today, cleaning things out on St. Charles Avenue. They're also encouraging homeowners to do the same in front of their homes. Highway 1 in Port Fourchon is now closed south of the Lee Ontario lock. However, they say dock facilities are faring well and there's no water on roadways in Port Fourchon itself at this time. Several COVID-19 testing sites are closed due to weather. That includes select sites run by the Louisiana Army National Guard and the Office of Homeland Security. In addition, the testing site at Walmart in Laplace will be closed through Friday. Don't forget, you can also keep up with the developments in the tropics with our WWL TV app. It is free to download in the App Store. You'll find updates from our weather experts along with live satellites and radars.
All right, we want to get to St. Bernard Parish now. Have been following the impacts of the storm in several areas. So let's get to St. Bernard Parish. Paul Murphy is there live now. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Sheba. This area of St. Bernard Parish is now experiencing 4 to 6 feet of storm surge. And as a result, the ring levee that surrounds Delacroix has now experienced quite a bit of overtopping. The winds are also, I checked, about 20 miles per hour where we're standing right here, and that is also adding to an overtopping situation here. With us is Parish President Guy McGinnis. Guy, what do we have here?
Paul, number one, thank you for being here and allowing us to get the word out. We have our ring levee here at Delacroix on the western end of that levee system. We have a breach here or overtopping of our levee here. So we caught it early. Our crews are on their way to fill it in with rocks and sand and to make sure that we protect the Delacroix community. Before long, this drainage ditch right here will be filled. As you can see, the water's coming up fast. So we're our crews are showing up right now. We're going to get this taken care of for the Delacroix community.
And we did see on our trip down here between Reggio and Delacroix quite a bit of water on the highway. It looks like we're going to have to make a quick beeline to get out of here, so we're not stuck back here. But that is all because of the storm surge, correct? Or the wind and storm surge?
It's the wind and the storm surge here in St. Bernard Parish. We get wind for a couple of days. We get a serious tidal surge here. So between the wind and the storm surge, we're seeing that here. And you're exactly right. About 20 minutes ago, we had nothing on the roadway that you just came through. And now you see, you saw what you saw there. So we definitely asking people to stay away from the lower end of St. Bernard Parish. It's getting dangerous by the moment. And we got some work to do here on this levee, and we're going to have some more work to do to flood fight this along our roadways.
Adam is showing us video of the overtopping. If you were not able to catch this quickly, what is the danger? What is the fear here?
It really doesn't look like much right now as you're looking at it, but I'll tell you that's going to be a serious problem if nothing was done here in the next hour or so. We luckily had a citizen back here, and he notified us, and we're going to have this fixed here within the next 45 minutes or so. So it's something I'll tell you, our crews are out and about. Being that the wind is still only around 25 miles an hour or so, we can have our crews out here, and they're safe. We're just asking the citizens of St. Bernard Parish to stay out of lower St. Bernard, actually, between now and when this event comes through this afternoon, to stay home, pick up the debris around your home, and enjoy your family this evening and don't get out.
What is the fear right now here in St. Bernard Parish? I was listening to the governor on the way down here talking about these feeder bands and the possibility that this storm, which is sort of wobbling right now, could produce these feeder bands that could just sit over your area and soak your area.
That is always a concern in St. Bernard because we're on an island, right? And we have to pump the water out. So, if we get 10 to 15 inches over a 3-day period, I believe we're going to be okay here, Paul. But like you said, you never know. And if one of these feeder bands comes through and dumps 10 inches within an hour or so, we're going to have some serious problems in St. Bernard. So we're ready. Our canals are pumped down. Our drainage catch basins have been cleaned over the last week. So we know the routine, and we always prepare for the worst and pray for the best.
And so this is one overtopping situation. Any indication that there are others along this ring levee or in other parts of St. Bernard Parish because of the tidal surge?
Because of this, we are inspecting the entire levee here in Delacroix. We don't anticipate to have any more overtoppings. As you can see, toward the highway here, it's pretty close to being at the top. So our guys are going to fix this. We turned our pumps on, so it should be able to keep up with that. So we're going to be flood fighting all night here, Paul. So we appreciate you guys being out here.
All right, that is St. Bernard Parish President Guy McGinnis as Adam works his way back here in lower St. Bernard Parish. And as you heard the parish president just say, this is not an area to come sightsee. This is not an area to even come take a look. Avoid this area as they flood fight here on the ring levee. Avoid this part of St. Bernard Parish. And we'll be reporting from St. Bernard Parish throughout the afternoon and evening. Now back to you in the studio.
Well, thank you so much for that look at St. Bernard Parish. We want to get back in the studio and check in with Dave, who's tracking cristobal. What's going on, Dave?
Yeah, that's right, Sheba. Hey, still live look here at Gulfport, Mississippi. Just been watching the surge flooding continue to come on in here through the parking lot area there. And you can see it's becoming even deeper now. I haven't seen any traffic going through here. You can see the waves on top of the surge as it continues to move on in. And we'll be continuing to watch this one all on the Mississippi coast. The surge flooding continues there. According to Peyton, there was a seawall. It's kind of even hard to see right now with the water continuing coming in. I think it's right in through here is where that wall is, but it's more or less useless at this point. So it's already probably 3-4 feet deep across part of this area here. So we're starting to see some of the water. You can still looking at some of the street light poles there, starting to creep up a little bit. That trailer also starting to get a little more kind of in the flooded type zone with that one. So we'll still watch this here very closely as we go forward on into throughout the rest of the afternoon into tonight with that landfall coming in. Here in town, we saw some showers, nothing too bad. We can manage all of this. Winds are not too bad with the rain. Sustained at 20, gusting to 29, gusting to 23 there in Slidell with still a few showers coming on in, but the latest number is still 1 o'clock, 50. The big thing we have to watch is this right here. It's now slowed down from 12 to 5 miles per hour. A slower storm means a prolonged rain and flooding event for us. So let's hope this does pick up a little more speed as it moves inland. We have these little spirals kind of spinning around. There's one right there kind of working around the circulation center. This was 30 miles from Grand Isle. That was as of 1 o'clock. Now it's 2 o'clock, so it should be technically 5 miles closer, right? 25 miles away. So we are going to continue seeing some of that rain, but notice it's kind of wrapping on the backside there as well as on into the south side of it. So all this rain you see over the Gulf waters, that still has to spread across part of the North Shore still, where you have not picked up too much rain. By 7 o'clock tonight, you see the storms there not too far from Hammond to Denham Springs area in the Baton Rouge area. It continues to work its way northward toward Monroe by Monday, 7 a.m., and then way up to the north there as we go forward. So landfall again moving on in just immediately to the west of New Orleans, and all that rain continues here. And there's that swirl. You see that little mini swirl amongst the big circulation with that, and that continues to bring us some of that wet weather as well. Band of pretty good rain coming out of Mississippi, about to cross over the Pearl River here, also across Lake Pontchartrain, some pretty heavy rain. Not too bad, Baton Rouge and Morgan City, at least for right now. But you can see there's that heavy rain coming across Pearl River County there, back over toward Harrison and Hancock County in Mississippi, and right along I-59. Very heavy rain coming into Poplarville area, just north of Picayune. That'll move into Bogalusa, eventually Franklinton. Much of the North Shore will start to see some of that, and very heavy rain down across Lake Pontchartrain as well. Here in the city, we are seeing some rain immediately along the South Shore here, but not quite overland, maybe toward Lakeview area, the foot of the Causeway, and parts of Metairie getting on some of the rain coming out of Lake Bourne, and a little band there coming in. Winds will pick up. Of course, downpours coming from this as well, too. And you can see from Gentilly over there by Lakefront Airport, Little Woods area, some heavy rain down I-510 over by Michoud to Chalmette. Again, in Metairie, some lighter, steadier rain back over toward Kenner, too. Some breezy conditions tied in with all of this. And farther to the south, you can see here we're looking at a pretty good rain band coming through Grand Isle at this point. That'll continue moving toward Cutoff, Galliano, Leeville, Port Fourchon area. And if it holds together, Homa and Chauvin will get in on some of that as well. So timing it out this morning, we had scattered showers. This afternoon, landfall will occur here in a couple of hours now. Heavy rain still possible by tonight. Heavy rain and wind, and tomorrow more heavy rain and wind, but it'll be more scattered about, but it still could be sitting over the period for extended period of time. The latest impacts, though, you'll see widespread rain of 4 to 8 inches there. A few places could get up as much as 10 inches of rain. Storm surge along the lakes 1 to 3 feet. So we're starting to that point over toward Morgan City, about 2 to 4 feet there. Winds of 30 to 50 miles per hour, some higher gusts, and still can see a few tornadoes and some of those power outages starting to show up as well, too. Precision cast shows between now and 6 o'clock, bands of rain coming in more the North Shore to Baton Rouge getting impacted here. The city might not see as much here as that circulation moving just off to the west there of the city. You can see there that big circulation center there. But notice by 10 o'clock tonight, more heavy rain. Mississippi coast to the North Shore. This is where we could see some of the heaviest rain so far this season, rather this event, and that's going to continue being a problem for us. All those rivers there from the North Shore to Mississippi coast definitely going to be coming up with this. That continues on into midnight tonight, and finally by tomorrow morning, a little reprieve on the North Shore, but still heavy rain here. And this is one thing I have to really watch closely as we get into tomorrow morning. These feeder bands, as the storm itself moves off to the north, feeder bands come up from the Gulf of Mexico, and if they set up and sit over the city for a couple of hours, that is going to lead to some flash flooding and street flooding issues for us tomorrow morning. This is the third model run that we've seen here where it's continuing to show that opportunity for this to happen. And this is from roughly about 6 o'clock in the morning to 8:30 in the morning, right over top of the city. Look at that. It continues all the way till about the early part of the afternoon, finally tapering off as we head into 5:30 in the afternoon hours here, and things start to improve as we head into Tuesday. But that band of rain coming on in, persisting for that long, likely will cause some significant headaches for us if this plays out the way the models are hinting at it could for tomorrow. So that is a trend I look for. I always look for trends on the radar to see if something like that shows up, and indeed that is something we'll be watching closely. Rainfall totals, again, still looking at 4 to 8 inches, mostly the North Shore here, back to Mississippi. Now they're kind of spreading a little farther north into parts of over toward Brookhaven, Mississippi, maybe Jackson, back toward Hattiesburg as well. So this is an issue because this is the watershed for all those rivers across the North Shore, Tangipahoa River, Bogafalaya River, Chafuncta River, which is farther to the south, of course, too, Bogachita River. So all those in the tributaries won't be able to drain because the water in the lake is so much higher that it's just going to sit there and accumulate and back up. So that's why flooding of the rivers on the North Shore is going to be an issue for us as we get on into a little bit later on Monday and into Tuesday before they start to fall quite a bit across the area. Flash flood watch remains in effect for everyone until Tuesday morning with, again, possible rain totals of 4 to 8 inches. Already here in New Orleans, we're coming up on 2.5 inches of rain already. Localized about 10 inches in a few places. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of that. Looking at some of those rivers, here's the Chafuncta River in Covington. You can see here, latest value about 10 feet. We'll get to 24 feet. Flood stage is 20, so 4 feet above flood stage there. That will occur by 1 o'clock there on Tuesday. Here's the Bogafly, Boston Street in Covington, currently sitting there about 3.25 feet. Flood stage is 6 feet. This should get up to 11 feet. So all those parks and everywhere along the Bogafly and some of those homes nearby, you are going to see that water rise quickly and will stay that way all the way into Monday and Tuesday before it begins to fall as well. And here's the Bogafly Camp Covington, currently at 35.5 feet-ish, and we can see here 35.4 feet, getting up to about 51.5. Flood stage is 45, so 6 feet above flood stage there. So we are going to continue watching for some high water rises with all of that as well. Heading on into, again, Monday into Tuesday when all that rain starts piling up across those areas. Looking ahead throughout the day today, again, still looking at little rain, maybe see some breaks here, but notice the rain does go up and increase as we get to overnight tonight. So overnight, a lot of times these tropical systems tend to expand rainfall coverage. Thunderstorms start blossoming a little more overnight, and that's when we could see some of that heavy rain while some of you are sleeping. So make sure you have ways to get weather alerts, whether it be on your phone or a weather radio or some other way to get alerts, because we do have the potential for some flash flooding issues as we head into tonight. You'll see here, while temperatures are supposed to be in the 80s, it's still going to be pretty much warm out there. As we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, the weather does finally improve. Temperatures back in the 90s. Scattered storms. Actually, a front's going to come through Wednesday, not really cooling us down much, but it will help to bring us a little better weather with respect to lower humidity as we head on into a little later on this week. Again, live look here in Gulfport, Mississippi. Our camera here at hurricanetrack.com. You can see that flooding surge continues to move on in here, and the water continues to get deeper. Can't even see that seawall anymore as that water has been rising all morning long, and the entire parking lot now is totally washed out here by that water. So we'll continue to watch the latest with cristobal. Right now, again, winds of sitting there at 50 miles per hour, but we're watching, and hopefully it does pick up a little bit of speed when we get to the 4 o'clock update here in about 2 hours. So we'll continue to have the latest updates coming for here on our website, on our app. If you don't have it, check that out. You can watch us live on there if you're on the go. And if you're traveling out and about to friends and families to stay safe, you can check us out there as well.
The faster it moves, the better. Dave, thank you very much. Let's check in on St. John Parish. We've got Tan Trung standing by live. Hey, Tan.
Hey, Karen, nice to hear your voice again. And
You
we
too.
are near the Frenier Landing Oyster Bar and Restaurant. And for many people that live in and around St. John Parish, they know how flood prone this area is. That's the lake behind me. And because of the wind's direction, it's been blowing really east. For most of the day, it's taking all of that water from Lake Pontchartrain and pushing it closer inland here, closer to the tracks here. And there's a railroad track that kind of divides this area from this side of the lake to the other side, leading back to near Interstate 10. And on the other side, you have a good amount of water that's covering the roads right now. We just spoke with Jacqueline Hotar, the parish president here in St. John Parish, and she said all the pumps here are working, all 23 of them at this point. No major worries in terms of trouble spots. There was a evacuation order for those areas north of I-10. It's hard to say how many people took heed of that, but she said most of the people that are living in those areas have been through many storms. They're hardy people. They know what to do. We met one resident here just a short while ago, Joey Keller. He was driving his truck from this back area. He lives not too far from the Frenier Landing Oyster Bar restaurant, and he didn't seem too worried about it. Take a listen.
So we're always concerned about our low-lying areas north of Interstate 10. So we called for a voluntary evacuation of those areas because as the lake begins to rise, the water will get on the road and the residents will be trapped in, if they don't evacuate. But a lot of the folks who do live back there, they're used to it. So some of them choose to stay in, but we're concerned about any low-lying area. We continue to see small rain bands come through, not as heavy as what we could have actually gotten, so that's a good thing, but we expect to see these same rain bands come throughout the day.
So when we're talking about those low-lying areas, and we saw what Isaac did with a non-traditional hurricane, this storm is kind of non-traditional too. It's very lopsided and it's very patchy. Are you concerned about what this is going to bring later during the day?
We are, not as much as what we saw in Isaac. What we saw for Hurricane Isaac was a storm that actually just hovered over the parish for several days. And so it was just a serious rainmaker. What we see with Cristobal is that we have the potential for a lot of rain to come down, but it's going to come through the area very quickly. And as soon as the storm gets past us, the National Weather Center said it will actually help us. We'll have that southerly wind that will pull the lake back. So this is a little bit different, but you're right. Sometimes your smaller storms give you the biggest problems. And so we want our residents to just be mindful of that, always be prepared for what could happen. But we don't expect to see what we saw in Hurricane Isaac.
Now, you issued a evacuation order for low-lying areas. Do you know if people actually heeded that warning or they stayed put at this point?
If they've left, they've gone on their own. We do have, we had activated our shelters in case any of those individuals who were in those areas wanted to come into our shelters. We have not had anyone report. Like I said before, a lot of the residents in those communities, they've, been there and done that, so they know what to do or what they are going to do. So they're seasoned, as all of our residents are, and everyone in South Louisiana. We're very seasoned for this.
So take us into your office for a little bit, because for the past couple of months, you've been urging people to stay home, and now you kind of have to shift, at least in the low-lying areas, to say you might have to leave your home on this. And talk about the strangeness of the times right now with the pandemic and now hurricane season. How tough is that to balance with the parish president to kind of move the parish forward during this time?
It's very tough, even from a planning perspective, having meetings where you're on Zoom platforms or having to just space out in a conference room. And so we've asked residents early on to have a plan B, because sometimes the plan A of evacuation is at a hotel, whereas that may look a little bit differently. So we've asked residents to just prepare for a plan B in case they couldn't go where they would normally go when they evacuate. So it's been very different, but our folks are very resilient and adaptive. And so whatever is thrown our way, I have no doubt that we will rise to the challenge as we always have.
Southeastern Louisiana is no stranger to storms, but this is fairly early in the storm season. What's your gut telling you about the rest of the season? Are you worried about it now? How do you feel?
Look, I said when the pandemic started, I can't even listen to my gut anymore. We just look at the facts, we look at data, we look at what's on paper. And so we're ready for anything. All of our 23 pumps at our 13 pump stations, they're all ready to go. We've got our generators at all of our pump stations that don't have permanent generators in case we lose power. We're on calls all day with energy and all of our partners. So we're ready for whatever Cristobal wants to bring, hoping that it's just very, very quick. It gets in and gets out of here. But we are definitely ready and prepared in St. John Parish.
And that was Jacqueline Hotard right there, Jacqueline Hotard, the parish president. And we're back here live near Furnier Landing, the Oyster Bar and Restaurant. And again, it's a very scenic kind of storm scenario here. Many times during the hurricane seasons in the past, we've seen this area flood. And as we came in here from New Orleans, driving into St. John Parish, Laplace driving down along Airline Highway. It's a bizarre scene because, again, it's a classic feel. I mean, the humidity right now, there's a bit of rain, a bit of wind as well. I mean, it's classic tropical season. But, you know, right along Airline Highway, you had many people just making their groceries, going to the gas stops and going to Walmart, so on and so forth. So you have this whole mix of pandemic where people are now getting curbside takeout and also kind of going back to their homes to kind of stay away from the elements today. But I have to say it's not too bad at this moment. We're starting to see a little bit more rain. The positive aspect of this is that Jacqueline Hotard, the parish president, said that later on tonight the winds should shift because it's been blowing east. Most of that water, as they get an easterly wind, is coming into this area. So as this storm moves through, they hope that the winds will shift and then move some of that water out. But certainly when we talked to Joey Keller, a resident who lived here and has been living here for quite some time, he says it's probably going to take about a week for the water on the other side of the tracks behind me here, or in front of me, excuse me, to drain. So it's going to be a long week. If you want to do anything in terms of going through this area for people who are living here, they'll need a high water vehicle. We did see a nice BMW that was parked outside of this area, so that was probably a good move. So Karen, that's the latest here in St. John Parish. Again, all 23 pumps are working. They're not too worried about the problem spots right now. This is usually the common areas where they do see a lot of the water. Again, most of the areas north of I-10 are under an evacuation order, but many of the people there have been kind of storm veterans themselves, so they know what to do. So at this point, the parish is confident in what they're seeing. Pumps are working, and they're hoping that the storm will move through and then the winds will shift and move some of the water out. Reporting live from St. John Parish, Tan Trung, Eyewitness News.
All right, Tan, thank you so much. We want to get back over to Mississippi now. Our Erica Ferrando is in Waveland. We checked in with her earlier. She was seeing some street flooding, but nothing that residents weren't prepared for. Erica, what's going on now?
Well, we've actually moved farther south, so now we're right along the Gulf, and as you can see, the entire main road here, this is North Beach Boulevard, is completely flooded, but of course this is to be expected. This is what they see here in Waveland with any tropical system or any hurricane, of course. And so this entire road is flooded, and I've been speaking with some people out here. They say that they've kind of watched throughout the day as it's continued to rise. They say it's kind of gone up and down, but it's higher now than it has been all day. And just looking at these signs and looking at the waves out here, I mean, obviously this water has just been pushing onto these roads. Now, I've been speaking with these Waveland residents right here, Daniel and Abby, and they've just been out here kind of checking out what's been going on, talk about what you've been seeing. And like you said, this is kind of something you're used to with anything like this?
Yes, ma'am. It's everything we're used to. Anytime a tropical storm or depression comes through, water comes up here, floods the road. Anything above a tropical storm, the water gets higher and higher.
How does this compare to what you've seen in the past?
Even though it's bad, it's not as bad as what we've seen, especially comparable to Katrina, because the water definitely rose and we lost a lot of things here in our community.
Abby, what's it like for you to see this?
Kind of scary.
Feels a little scary right now, but I mean, of course, we're right on the Gulf, so obviously it's a lot windier here than it was when we were down Highway 603. Obviously, it wasn't as windy right there. This is kind of to be expected when you're right here. I know more than 250 roads in this county are flooded right now, but these are roads that typically flood for anything like this. Talk about where you live. You said you're just up the road right here. How is it from where your home is?
Yes, ma'am. Fortunately for us, we're on the north side of the railroad tracks, so typically we don't get any flooding on our side. It's mainly the south side of the railroads, and like you said, up on 603 and those low-lying areas.
Thank you so much. What are you prepared for the rest of the day?
Take it easy and just take all this in.
Thank y'all so much. And you can kind of see these homes out here. Obviously, all these homes out here along the beach are raised, and so they are prepared for this. They know that this kind of flooding in this area can happen. So we, spoke with some county leaders a little bit earlier, and they said that these people are used to this type of thing, and they kind of prepare for this, and they expect these areas to obviously take in water. But the good thing is that they do not expect any of these homes to actually take in water because they are built up so high. We were driving down Highway 603 earlier, and there are cars just lined all along the highway just to basically make sure their cars don't get flooded. So people have been preparing for this. They've been moving their cars. I believe yesterday and maybe even this morning, they started moving their cars to make sure that their cars don't take in water. Their homes are not expected to take in water. So mostly it's just a lot of street flooding right now in Hancock County. For now, let's toss it back to y'all in the studio.
All right, I'm glad to hear that people are just dealing with flooding and rains that they've expected so far. We hear that wind, though, is really, really strong right now. All right, guys, we are, of course, have been tracking Cristobal and its impacts all across our area. We want to take a quick break, and we'll have more coverage for you after that.
All right, good afternoon. It is now 2:30, and we are bringing you our continuing coverage of Tropical Storm Cristobal.
That's right. We've been following its impacts all across the region this morning. Devin Bartolotta joining us now with the latest. Hey, Devin.
Hey, Sheba. St. Bernard Parish is seeing the waters rise and is continuing to shut down roads in the lower part of the parish. Florissant Highway and Delacroix Highway are closed at Louisiana 46. Water is also topping the levee at Delacroix. There are no widespread power outages at this time. However, Entergy is reporting several small outages throughout the city, throughout the area, rather. There are about 500 homes without power in the Elmwood and Harahan areas. Residents in Venetian Isles, Lake Catherine, and Irish Bayou, and other neighborhoods outside of the levee system are now under a voluntary evacuation. The city of New Orleans issued that within the hour, expecting a storm surge up to 5 feet. Also new, U.S. Highway 11 is closed between I-10 and I-90 in the Bayou Sauvage area due to flooding, according to the Department of Transportation. The Humane Society of Louisiana is urging people to keep their animals inside for the next day or two and move livestock to higher ground as Cristobal makes landfall. Also, they're recommending pet owners make sure their animals have ID tags. Don't forget, you can also keep up with all the developments in the tropics with our WWL TV app. It's free to download in the App Store. You'll find updates from our weather experts along with live satellites and radars.
Storm Cristobal, we are starting to see, are continuing to see rather, that strong southeast wind pushing in the water up in the Lake Bourne, Lake Catherine, Mississippi, St. Bernard, down towards Plaquemines area. The good news, we're starting to see the Grand Isle tides or the surge start to drop. It's dropping slowly and they'll remain elevated, but it looks like it's past its peak there. St. Bernard Parish, Shell Beach got up to nearly 6 feet. It looks like it's leveled off as well, but we're still seeing high tides and storm surge come into the Waveland area. Of course, we just saw the live shot of the water there, and we're watching the water continuing to come into parts of the lake. So if you're on the South Shore, initially we weren't really expecting much in the way of a rise in water on the South Shore, but we nearly up to 4 feet at the new canal location. That's once you get to the end of the road west end, up to nearly 4 feet. So of course, we're seeing a lot of water come onto Lakeshore Drive, and that's of course all outside the levee protection system. But we've got this strong easterly to northeast wind at times, so still not seeing water rise on the North Shore because the water is being essentially kind of pushed away from it. Now, once the center of the storm down here gets to the north, we'll eventually start to see more of that southerly wind and might see the tides come up just a little bit on the North Shore, but that might not even happen until later on tonight. But we continue to see the strong winds push on in, and because of that, storm surge still being an issue. Can I get Max 1 really quick? I want to show the Chris huffing and puffing. Chris is here, by the way. But you can see here's the storm surge in Gulfport, Mississippi. This is at Jones Park, and it's stayed the same. They're getting to their high tide, but water continuing to come over the wall, which is right here. The beach is here, and then the water starts out here. But there's even reports that they've shut down parts of Highway 90 in Biloxi because on the Back Bay, you get the water coming in, causing problems there. So the storm surge issues have been, of course, in the low-lying spots that typically see, flooding, but certainly a little bit more than we would normally see on a windy day. Here's what we've got going on with the storm itself. It's wobbled a little bit. It slowed down, of course. That's why we're still seeing that strong wind push on in and the storm surge levels rise. But you can see here, you've got the center here, this little vortex that was kind of rotating around, now swinging back up to the north. We'll have to see if maybe once this gets up here, it'll start to lift to the north. Just something we'll have to watch and see. But notice we've got thunderstorms on the back end of this, kind of decaying a little bit, some on the south side, and then we've got a lot of rainfall, of course, on the east side, kind of away from the center, which is what we expected. The uncertainty has been, though, kind of where the center goes. So here's what we look like on radar. Heaviest rain just to the north of New Orleans, right there along the lakefront, really. That's going to continue to head towards the east. We've got another batch of heavy downpours moving on to the North Shore up through Bogalusa, Picayune. Also, of course, the heavy rainfall continues to move on towards South Mississippi, but a bit drier, of course, as you go to the south. So a closer look in the metro, there's that heavy shower moving across the lake. Luckily, it's not over New Orleans or really over the North Shore either. That'll continue to head towards the Laplace area, and then going towards the south of that, fairly dry. We're seeing some showers move back into the Lafitte area. We've got Duke down there, I believe. Earlier, his live shot hit his jacket off. It looked nice. So seeing another little quick passing shower. Once that moves through, we'll see some more drying. And then there's, of course, the center looking drier towards Houma and Thibodaux with maybe a few more showers later on this afternoon. But the main story for rainfall looks like it's going to be Mississippi as we go throughout the afternoon as this band continues to feed up into coastal Mississippi, wrapping up into the North Shore. So we're still going to watch mainly the North Shore and South Mississippi, it looks like, in the near future for the heaviest rainfall. Notice this does extend well to the south. Not seeing rain on radar here, but it's there. Our radars just simply don't go out that far. But this will continue to wrap up as well, and so we continue to expect the showers to move on shore, especially in Mississippi, possibly the North Shore, as we go throughout the afternoon and evening. Still expecting the highest rain totals there. We did update this kind of back down on the rain totals if you go towards the west, maybe 1 to 3 inches on the high side for areas towards Houma, and then it does increase as you get a little bit further, of course, to the east of where we're expecting the center to go, kind of probably just west of New Orleans and the lake. So 4 to 8 inches still possible up here. Just depends on what those bands do later on this afternoon into tonight. Just one of those things we'll have to keep a close eye on and watch, but this is the zone where flooding could be most impactful as we go throughout today. The high risk, they haven't updated this. It still includes New Orleans, but we wouldn't be surprised if this got shifted maybe. But everyone still has that chance for flooding. Now, one thing we'll be watching are these bands going into tomorrow. I'll show you what I mean. So here's what Sunday looks like as we go throughout this afternoon. There's the rainfall continuing to be plowed up into Mississippi and the North Shore. Of course, you've still got the strong southerly wind, which is going to keep the storm surge pretty elevated and keep continuing to go into the lake. So the lake's going to stay running high as well. As we get into 7, 8, 9 o'clock, there's a center, and then towards midnight, making its way finally to the north. If this plays out, we'll still have that surge of moisture and rain coming up on the Mississippi coast, down towards St. Bernard, Plaquemines Parish possibly. But look at this, still just to the east of New Orleans. So if this sets up like this, still not seeing the greater flooding potential here in the metro. It's just off towards the east. Now, as we go throughout the overnight periods, Cristobal will continue to lift to the north, and what will happen is a lot of models have been indicating this kind of tail, we call it a feeder band that wraps around. It kind of extends far away from the center. These setting up are going to pose the greatest rain flooding risk. The thing is, they're usually pretty narrow, so one location may get 10 inches of rainfall, and then 20 miles down the road you may get 2 inches of rain. So you can see how difficult that part of the forecast is going to be. But models have been pretty consistent with showing this feeder band kind of setting up throughout Monday morning somewhere in southeast Louisiana, maybe South Mississippi. And if this sets up, of course, over the city, then we've got problems. We'll just have to wait and see if that unfolds. That'll likely be tomorrow, or that would happen tomorrow morning into the late morning hours. Here's it still showing, though, that band riding on through the area throughout Monday morning, and then things start to gradually clear out as we go into Monday night. Now, by Tuesday, not really dealing with the effects of Cristobal anymore, and then we actually have a cold front on the way by Wednesday, not bringing colder air, though. Storm surge warnings do continue, of course, for South Mississippi and St. Bernard Parish, going up into the eastern parts of Orleans Parish, Lake Catherine, Venetian Isles, that are seeing the storm surge right now. It does not include inside the levee protection system. So, and then it goes down to the mouth of the Mississippi. That's where we're still seeing the highest surge. We're going to continue to see the high surge there as long as we have that strong onshore flow. 1 to 3 feet in the lake, but I just told you we're up to nearly 4 feet on the south shore at the new canal. So could be a little bit elevated because we're seeing a bit more of that northeasterly wind wrapping around. Of course, that's well below the levee protection system for New Orleans. But of course, you're seeing Lakeshore Drive go underwater in a lot of locations. And then storm surge values already dropping down towards Grand Isle. It looks like they've leveled off, kind of dropping a little bit. It'll remain elevated. And of course, those low-lying roads will probably stay underwater a little while longer. And then storm surge not as high, of course, as you get into Terrebonne Parish, where you actually have more of a northerly wind now, or an east-northeast wind, which acts to push that water out. So it all depends on where the center of that storm is. And since it's a little bit further east than we initially expected, you're seeing your more of a northerly component to some of the winds, especially from New Orleans to the west. Also, by the way, the Mississippi River, it's going to jump probably a little bit this afternoon, but not much, maybe up to 16 feet. Of course, our flood stage is 17 feet, and we're well below the levees of 20 feet. So it'll jump up, and of course, it's already up into the mid 15.3 to 15.4 as we've seen kind of that influx of surge coming through the area. So there's your 7-day forecast. You can see 100% chance of rain today, of course. There'll be periods where it's not raining. I mean, that's what we're seeing now. It does look like the highest flooding threat is going to remain in Mississippi, and then 100% chance of rain tomorrow. It'll be on and off. And then as we go into Tuesday, we're looking at a 40% chance of showers. By Wednesday, that cold front moves in. It's not a cold front, though. It's not going to bring any colder air. We're still in the lower 90s, but lower humidity. And then staying in the low 90s and drying out by Friday and Saturday.
Thank you very much. Let's take a look in New Orleans East. We have been talking about the Venetian Isles area. This is the situation now. Look how fast that water came up in 1 hour. What a perfect post for us. Thank you for making it easy for us, Sharon and Billy. And that was in the Venetian Isles. And we know about an hour ago, New Orleans did call for a voluntary evacuation for Venetian Isles, Lake Catherine, and Irish Bayou. And those areas do traditionally take on water. We are joined now by Council Member Cindy Wynn on the phone. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, good afternoon, Karen. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. This is your district. Tell us about the flooding concerns.
So there's flooding in the area. NOLA.ready.gov have just called for an evacuation, voluntary evacuation. I've been in communication with several of the members out in that area. And so far, those that I've spoken to is going to just stay still. Mr. Bell said that he doesn't have a car high enough to travel out, so he's going to just stay where he's at, buckle down. He's spoken to many of the residents in Venetia now, and it looks like most of them will just kind of stay still. This is not their first rodeo. Very resilient individuals, and so we just got to keep them in our prayers. For those that feel like they need to evacuate, because they feel like they're not in a safe area. They need to do so immediately, but still take very precaution as you're traveling out. As you indicated, rain is getting really high out in that area. And if you feel like you're in a safe area, I would advise to stay put.
And again, these are storm veterans. That's one of the prices you pay for living right there in that beautiful area along the lake.
That's correct. And they're staying very positive and very strong about it. Many of them prepare for cristobal, as we warned them last week. And so, again, this is not their first rodeo. We just want to make sure that everybody's safe in that area. And we're going to continue to keep them in our prayer. And I will continue to stay in touch with them throughout the day, making sure that everything is good. So far, very good news is that the power is not out in that area. And so I think that's good news, but we just got to have to ride through this weather with them.
What about the rest of the East? What is the situation there in terms of the rainfall and power outages there, or are there any concerns?
At this point, I have not received any concern from any residents in the East. No power outage reported by Entergy.
Okay. So if your constituents are watching right now, what is your message to them as we head into the evening, into the late afternoon hours and then into the evening?
I think to stay inside, stay still. If you see stuff outside of your home that are lingering, heavy stuff that could be flying around, please run outside, remove the items, and come on back in and just buckle down.
And presumably you're in contact with some of your fellow council members. Are there any issues in all of Orleans Parish that you're aware of that people are paying particular attention to?
Not at this point.
All right, so far so good then, I guess.
Yes,
I mean,
yes, we're going to keep our finger crossed and keep praying.
Indeed. Let's hope that this is a trial run, really. Let's hope and cross our fingers. But we know it's far from over. Councilwoman Cindy Wynn, thank you for joining us.
No problem. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And if we want, we can show those pictures again with Venetian Isles. And we know that the evacuation order, the voluntary evacuation order, extends beyond Venetian Isles to those other low-lying areas, including Lake Catherine and Irish Bayou. So we have definitely lost the councilwoman right there. She's hanging up. And it is now 2:42. Let's see if we can take a break. We'll be right back.
Another update on what we've got going on out there. Of course, not a whole lot of change as of our 1 p.m. update, which was nearly 2 hours ago. Cristobal barely moving. You can see the movement north at 5 miles per hour, which is down from 12 miles per hour at the 10 a.m. advisory. Pressures have stayed the same. Winds have stayed the same. So this thing is not going to intensify anymore. But as it slowed down, it's still pumping in all that southeasterly and easterly winds, which means the storm surge is going to remain elevated in those typical low-lying spots. We just talked about a lot of them. And we're also continuing to see the wind come into the lake and more of a northeasterly wind at the lake, which means higher tides on the south shore. We are seeing some of that flooding along the lakefront area. Now you can see here, we've got the winds, a closer view. This is why we're still seeing that storm surge. It's coming on in. Did have an update though on some of the tides. The Shell Beach tide looks like it has peaked nearly at 6 feet. It should start to go down now that we're past high tide. We'll have to watch it. It's going to remain high, though. The Grand Isle storm surge looks like it peaked and is already going down, although it's still going to remain elevated. And then your storm surge is still ongoing up in South Mississippi, along with kind of the eastern tip of Orleans Parish, where we talked about the flooding just a minute ago. Now we do have that tornado watch, meaning that's where the conditions are most favorable for the tornadoes. It really looks like South Mississippi and going mainly over into Alabama is where you're most likely going to see some of those spin up tornadoes. A lot of times what will happen, you have a water spout form and then it'll move onshore. And we've seen a couple of those this morning, but not really expecting that here in southeast Louisiana. Now we do have that slight risk for severe weather, but as long as that center of the storm gets closer and closer to us, the tornado threat will remain just off to the east, which is why South Mississippi and parts of Alabama are under that tornado watch. Here's the latest on satellite and radar. Very interesting storm once again. It's been broad and wide for days now. And we've been talking, remember about a week ago, we were talking about this Central American gyre, this large rotation, and we said this little tropical system would form within it. Well, that's what happened. And then the whole thing moved to the north. And that's why the wind field has remained so wide. And that's why the circulation has been so broad. And it's not been able to organize because it is a large system. You can see here, here's the overall circulation. And I can tell you, we're already starting to see some northerly movement to this, which is good because for a little bit there, it really kind of wobbled and stalled out. But it looks like now that this little vortex is swinging back to the north, it looks like we're finally starting to see some movement to this thing, which is good because we need this thing to move and get on out of here. We don't want it to stall out. But possibly it might make landfall closer to maybe somewhere in Plaquemines Parish, where earlier we were thinking it would make landfall closer to Port Fourchon. So it shifted and wobbled a little bit to the east, but probably seeing landfall still somewhere in this area of southeast Louisiana. And of course, that would bring the center closer to New Orleans. That's not a bad thing, though. This isn't a strong hurricane where your most intense part is right there at the center. The most intense part is going to be kind of displaced from the center, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So here's your center down here. Notice we've got this kind of dry slot in here, and then we've got more of those rain bands on the outer edge of the circulation that continue to move up into South Mississippi. Not seeing a whole lot of rainfall, and we really haven't seen a whole lot of rainfall so far in New Orleans. The airport has picked up about an inch, downtown a little over 2 inches, which is not bad because it'll come in, it'll collect, and then we'll dry out. It'll be able to drain off, and then we see another little downpour. And we can handle that if that continues to happen. You see here a heavy shower moving across the lake. Mandeville, Covington, you're seeing some of those tropical downpours coming to an end in Slidell with just a few lingering showers. Same thing for New Orleans, some lighter showers coming in from the west or from the east, but continuing to move off towards the west. South of town, you can see there down towards Lafitte in Jefferson Parish, you're seeing some of those showers continuing to move into Lafourche, Raceland, Cutoff, Galliano. You're going to see some of these tropical downpours. It's just a line, though. It's not an extended line that's going to cause flooding. So that'll move on through. You'll see another dry period. Our main concern is going to be this band that's had kind of set up kind of off the coast of Mississippi and Alabama that's continuing to move up to the north. And now that the storm is actually moving, or it looks like it's starting to move toward the northwest, we'll see this band continuing to come on shore in South Mississippi. Of course, it's swinging over into parts of the North Shore as well. So these heavy downpours will continue. This is where most of the rainfall is this afternoon. It's probably going to continue as we continue to see this tail end of this fetch of moisture kind of right up around the circulation. So if you just kind of imagine this part of the storm, if it continues to wrap around, it looks like it will come more on Mississippi, the North Shore, and possibly stay north of the New Orleans area, which would be good news. That means our flooding threat would be lower if that center of the storm comes overhead. 48 inches is still what we're thinking is possible on those heavier rain bands, and that's what we're going to be watching with that coming on shore. Notice we've dropped our totals down towards the west. Baton Rouge, maybe an inch or two, and then it slowly increases, but it all depends on where those bands set up. We'll have to watch. We could still get some banding later on today. We could certainly get some banding as we go into your Monday morning. So we still have about 24 hours to watch this thing. That's the latest on Cristobal.
And we are still in St. Bernard Parish, where we're standing on a rock levee in Florissant, which is not too far from the Shell Beach area. And I'm with two St. Bernard Parish Council members, Richie Lewis and Fred Everhart. Fred, you represent this area, and Richie, you're a parish council at large. Talk about where we are here and what you see back here on the highway.
You know, every time we have a tropical storm, the water pushes into our lower parts of our parish, and our road department comes out and we put this rock dam. You know, it's all about keeping our residents safe and trying to control the water as much as we can. We're prone to flooding back in these areas, so we know how to handle it. Our road department does a great job. And it's about keeping our residents safe. We try to keep them informed, and, you know, right now we're working on getting some boats out of harm's way, and that's what we're doing out here today.
Now, this is the road that takes you back to Waclowski and Shell Beach, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so this is typical of what you would see down the highway?
Yeah, this is going to be flooded all the way down, even past the Waclowski Bridge. It's flooded both ways. We've deemed it impassable at this point, so vehicles are going to no longer be allowed other than high water emergency vehicles that can get back there. So we just urging our residents to stay safe and, you know, call us if you're already down there and you're stuck down there. Call us up and let us know if you need help, and we'll do everything we can to get to you.
Fred, I guess you would try to evacuate everybody out of here before this, right?
Absolutely. We use social media, and we use the news reporters and our local websites on our Facebook pages. Tried to get everybody to heed the warning to get their boats out, work with the Southeast Flood Authority to get the boats in safe harbor. But we didn't predict the wind was going to stay out the southeast like this and the storm slow down. So we're getting an unusual amount of water real fast. And now we're kind of worried about boats that chose to stay, you know.
Are we still talking 4 to 6 foot storm surge, or is it higher than that?
It depending on how slow the storm is going to go. I think it's going to be a little higher than that.
And we just traveled the road between Delacroix and here, and there's quite a bit of water on that road right now, and it's almost impassable now. Talk about that.
It is impassable. Oh, this road is impassable. The sheriff made the call. We closed the boat down, and we raised this levee up all the way up to, actually they got more rock coming in to top it off. Then we're going to have to worry about the water coming around the side of the levee on LA 46, so we can save this community here. And Delacroix Island, we got pumps at 100% right there. We got our pumps running, and our ditches pumped down, our drainage canals pumped down, and we're just trying to keep everything afloat until dry until you know, this storm passes.
Richie, what is your biggest fear right now?
Right now, my biggest fear is that this storm's not going to speed up and get back on track and get out of here. My fear is it sticks around. We all know, like Councilman Everhart said, that wind out of the southeast, if it stays too long on us, we're going to lose some property. And hopefully, like I said, my people staying safe. Just if you're already outside flood protection and you're hunking down, you know, maybe call in, let us know where you're at, just in case something happens, because we're worried.
And you're definitely telling folks to stay off the highways because the water's coming up. It's coming up quickly, and it could, the whole roads could be covered in not too long from now.
Right now, the sheriff's office has the extension block down here. You can't get down here. It's like Councilman Everhart said, it's impassable. Parish President Guy McGinnis is sending more rocks down here to try to keep these levees up and hold the water back until this thing passes and moves on, and then we can see where we're at and mitigate the damage.
Talk a little bit about these communities here in the southern end of St. Bernard. How many people live back here, and what are the towns that people live in back here?
It's not only about the residents. We have around maybe 10 or 12 residents that's deep rooted here. We have a lot of commercial fishing, all our commercial fishing fleets. We have a lot of assets down here, boats and land and things like that we have to protect. keep in mind that when this happens, it's all because we have no Barrier Island protector. So this is going to be an ongoing occurrence, and it's getting worse and worse every year. So we're taking precautions, our precautions change, and our routine changes yearly because things happen faster like it's doing right now.
So I asked you worst case scenario. What's the best case scenario at this point?
Best case scenario is the storm moves on. Just we need the storm to move on and get out of here, and the winds will switch directions and hopefully blow some of this water back out the same way it came in, and we can pick up. You can see that's fishermen here trying to get past us to get to their boats, and it's a sad thing. Our fishing community in St. Bernard is strong. It is very vibrant. It's a huge economic driver for St. Bernard, so we do everything we can to protect it.
And I'll give you each the last word here. What would you like to say to your constituents right now as we're still waiting on Cristobal to make landfall?
For everybody in St. Bernard, stay home, stay off the roadways. If you can stay home, absolutely stay home. If you're inside levee protection, stay home. It doesn't mean you can move around. We don't know what's going to come of this storm. If you're outside of levee protection and you're there, hunker down, call us, let us know where you're at, just so we have record of it. And if anything happens, we're going to do everything we can to get to you. Be safe and God bless.
And Fred, what are your last words?
I echo what Councilman Lewis just said. We're also asking residents to give us a little while to see how we can get people to come down and check on their boats and check on their properties down here. We're going to have to get with the sheriff and parish president, have a meeting to see if we can launch boats. But as of right now, you cannot get past the barricades. The road is completely submerged. So we're not putting anyone else in harm's way, and we don't want to send our guys to go get anybody that's stranded and put them in harm's way. So keep an eye on Facebook. We'll be updating it, and we'll let everybody know what they can do to get down here and check their boats.
Fred Everhart, Richie Lewis, Parish Councilman from St. Bernard Parish, thanks for joining us. And we'll also keep you updated here in St. Bernard Parish as we continue to see the water rise here with the storm surge associated with Cristobal. We'll be back in a little bit. Now back to y'all in the studio.
All right, Paul, thank you so much for the update there in St. Bernard Parish. We're going to take a quick break. We'll have more coverage of Cristobal after this.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 3 o'clock, and we are continuing our coverage of Tropical Storm Cristobal.
That's right. We are continuing to watch how it's impacting our region. Devin Bartolotta has the latest headlines. Hey, Devin.
Hey, Sheba. Many flights coming in and out of Armstrong International are being canceled, of course. Individual airlines make those decisions. The last flight took off around 2:30, and that might be it for the rest of the day, looking at the schedule right now. If you're traveling tonight, check the status before you leave. Storm surge on Lake Pontchartrain is more than 3 feet and continuing to rise at this hour. Lakeshore Drive has been closed as water continues to rise. In Delacroix, water is rising and topping the levee. Here's some video posted by St. Bernard Parish. Nearly all the highways in Lower St. Bernard Parish are shut down at this time and are being covered by water. There are restrictions in place on the Causeway Bridge in both directions due to the winds. No motorcycles, RVs, or glass trucks are allowed at this time. Don't forget, you can keep up with all the developments in the tropics with our WWL TV app. It's free to download in the App Store. You'll find updates from our weather experts along with live satellites and radars.
All right, top of the hour, 3 o'clock now. Thank you for joining us. And we've been watching very closely kind of the evolution of the center of the storm as it is just off the coast. Now, we'll likely see a landfall sometime in the next few hours. However, what exactly is going to be making landfall? Yes, there is a center of this broad circulation, but something we have been pointing out very closely are these several little weak vortices, basically little spins in the atmosphere that are all rotating around still that broad center. And I know it kind of looks like it, but there is not an eye with this storm. It is not an eye per se where you get the strongest winds around that eye. While that is not the type of setup we hear, yes, it kind of looks like that. It does have that appearance, especially considering we still have some pretty dry air in the center of the storm, which is keeping the center fairly exposed. Now, this is a high resolution satellite. This actually takes an image every minute. So this is actually in more real time than radar is. And this imagery shows you kind of the evolution of the circulation of the storm. It also shows you where a lot of the thunderstorm development has been and starting to set up a little bit more so on the eastern side. And that's why it looks like we may be coming a bit more in line and have a far better idea of where we could see some of the more flooding rains through the course of the night and going into early tomorrow. And that may be more the Mississippi coast and continuing up onto the North Shore. Maybe not the Mandeville area, Lacombe and Slidell, but maybe more northern St. Tammany, Washington, central and northern Tangipahoa Parish as these bands start to set up. Because keep in mind, this is moving inland, but we are going to stay on the wet side of it, even as it pushes farther north as we get into the overnight period and going into the day on Monday, once the storm center is still well to the north. A lot of rainfall has been moving over, and we have started to see some of those accumulations adding up, especially off to our east. And also with the rotation of the storm, you have the risk of tornadic storms. They tend to be weak, short-lived. They tend to spin up very, very quickly. So you usually don't have a great deal of lead time when those warnings are issued. And kind of unlike what we get in severe weather scenarios where you might have a tornado warning that's issued for a 45-minute time span, usually these warnings last for about 10, 15 minutes or so. It may briefly touch down and then is gone just as fast. But that'll be something that we continue to watch for a threat of out to the Mississippi coast. And then as this moves inland, we could see this kind of shift a little bit more to the north. Motion is at, or excuse me, winds are at 50 miles an hour. But again, we have been highlighting the fact that it has slowed down considerably. And one of the reasons that is because, one, it's starting to interact with land. A lot of times these storms take a very unusual not track per se, but start to behave a little bit differently once they start interacting with land. And also what I was seeing on satellite even earlier this morning, those little vortices, those little spins kind of rotating around the center, they usually kind of hold up that overall forward speed and sometimes almost appear to take the center and back it up a little bit, or if nothing else, slow it down. Because remember, since yesterday morning, the forward speed had been north at 12 miles an hour. It had been a very constant forward speed, and we saw that up to this morning. Well, as it is now getting near land, it has slowed down considerably. That is not what we want to see, because that just gives more time for that moisture to get funneled northward and more time for some further strengthening of the storm. Not that we're expecting any kind of rapid intensification by any means, but what I'm talking about is we may start to get more of those heavy rain bands kind of getting nearer the center of the storm. The longer it stays out over the water, the longer it has for that to happen. And where you see the brighter cloud tops, those are the strongest storms. Those are your taller cloud tops in the atmosphere. Those are your stronger thunderstorms. And we see those primarily the Mississippi coast, moving onto the North Shore, a little cluster just along the Louisiana coastline, north of the center of circulation. Again, by tonight, we ought to see that center more almost over northern Lake Maurepas, or even into Tangi, Livingston, St. Helena Parish as it continues northward. But even on into Monday, consider we are on the eastern side. So even with the center of circulation almost into Arkansas by tomorrow morning, we are still looking at that moisture being drawn up on the eastern, southeastern side of it, which will keep our rain coverage on the higher side. And if we get into any of those heavier bands, then flooding is still going to be an issue as we head into the day tomorrow. Kind of a wide look at radar. We do have some of the heavier storms moving across the Mississippi coast, but this is still a very broad circulation with heavy rain actually extending over toward Jacksonville and into the Atlantic Ocean. So this is still a very large system, a very broad spin, which is why it never looked like in the models. I will say models have done a fantastic job with this, never really intensified this storm. In fact, remember the official forecasts were for the winds to jump only to 60 miles an hour. At one time, the Weather or Hurricane Center was saying 65, but they always kind of backed off on any real intense storm making landfall. It always looked like this was going to be a tropical storm at landfall, and that's what it was looking like it is going to be. Still some heavy rain cells moving across the North Shore. What has really helped us out so far today in terms of flooding from rain, I'm not talking about storm surge. We'll detail that coming up in just a bit. But what has really helped us out is the fact that you do get a heavy round of rainfall and may pick up an inch or more in some spots. And then you get a fairly considerable break in the rain. So drainage is able to kind of catch up. Pumps for those areas that are being affected by the canals are able to kind of catch up. And so you kind of see the water settle, clear off of the roadways, clear out of some of the ditches and canals, and then you get another round of some heavy rainfall. It may start to get to the point where overnight or later tonight and tomorrow that we don't really get many of those breaks where you get the constant rain. That's the training effect. That's where you get those heavy rain bands setting up, and precisely where those bands set up, still very much unknown, but also looking more and more likely across Mississippi and then perhaps continuing up onto the North Shore. We haven't quite seen that type of a pattern south of the lake. We do get rounds of some heavy downpours, but I know from being at home this morning and driving in, you get a heavy downpour and then you get a pretty decent break in the rain. So just, again, natural drainage is able to kind of keep up. And really, relatively speaking, we have not seen some significant totals down toward the coast. Some of the rainfall estimates that we have seen, over 3 inches of rain along the Mississippi coast, 2 to 3, almost 4 inches of rain. North Shore areas, not quite as much, 1/8 of a inch to maybe an inch of rain, a little bit less as you get closer toward Baton Rouge. Here in the city, we've had some estimates. Again, these are rainfall estimates from radar. You're looking at 1+, maybe nearing 2 inches of rainfall. Our precision cast, or one of our high resolution precision cast models, again, kind of more spotty showers, becoming a little bit more of that training as we get into the overnight hours going into early tomorrow morning. Now, this model is kind of as the storm itself, the circulation lifts northward, we may start to see more of those bands lifting northward. But then as we get into tomorrow, we may start to see some of those setting up over parts of the more southeast Louisiana, maybe parts of the city. Again, will it be right over downtown? I don't know. Will it be more over Jefferson Parish? Will it be more over St. Bernard Parish? We just don't know right now, but that's why the entire area right now being highlighted for a high risk of the flooding rain. We may see this get kind of changed a bit, but I think maybe it's because we're looking at more of a risk today and tonight in Mississippi and on the North Shore, and then perhaps tomorrow we see more of kind of the metro New Orleans area down toward the coast, some of the bayou parishes under a more enhanced or higher risk of those flooding type rains as we continue through not only tonight and not only today and tonight, but also going into the day tomorrow. This is just kind of a rough, kind of widespread estimate of some of the rainfall totals that we could see. And we're still talking about a 4 to 8+ inch. Now, we have not seen anyone getting close to the 8. We have started to see kind of the bottom end of this range accumulated in Mississippi, not yet the 8, but consider we still have all night tonight to go and for much of the day tomorrow. Obviously, that chance of rain is going to be far less, and the accumulation is going to be far less as you go farther west. The gradient of the rainfall totals is going to be pretty tight. What I mean is Baton Rouge may see 1 to 2 inches of rainfall. You may get parts of Mississippi, once this is all said and done, in excess of 10 or more inches of rainfall. So you're going to have a little bit of rain to a whole lot of rain in a fairly short distance. And wherever the rain bands start to set up is where you're going to get those flooding type rainfall. And that's all going to be on the eastern side of it. Baton Rouge will remain on the western side, so Baton Rouge and farther west is going to remain on the drier side of this storm. Here are some of the actual rainfall totals that we have seen from some of our observing stations. The airport, only an inch of rain. Macomb, 9/100. So we have not seen the rainfall getting into southwestern Mississippi just yet. Downtown, 2.35. Bogalusa, Slidell, we are going to start to see those numbers increasing. We may not see the numbers in the city really start to spike until perhaps tomorrow, but North Shore areas and in Mississippi coast, we're expecting those numbers to really start to kind of not necessarily skyrocket, but really start to rise as we continue through the day today. The dry air had played a huge role in keeping this as a very weak, more unorganized, very broad storm. But as it is nearing land, you don't really see the dry air playing quite as much of a role. And one thing we did not see, and actually it's probably a good thing, we never did see the circulation of the storm get completely cut off with the dry air, because if that had happened, we probably would have seen the core of this begin to intensify. What I mean is, right now, there's a lot of energy spread out across a good portion of basically the central to eastern Gulf and into the Atlantic Ocean. With a broad range of energy like that, it is really difficult for these storms to start gaining steam and kind of getting their act together and getting better organized. What had been forecasted by some of the computer models was that this dry air would kind of completely surround the storm, and then you would get just this pocket of moisture. Well, if the storm had kind of gotten cut off from the rest of this broad circulation, you may have started to see kind of a rapid intensification. Luckily, that never did happen. And again, that window for further strengthening is quickly closing as the storm is going to be making landfall within the next few hours. Something else we've been watching very closely is the storm surge. And obviously in the areas that are not protected by the levee risk reduction system have already started to see those high water levels. And as we had been mentioning for Orleans Parish, when your phones went off a couple of days ago from a storm surge warning, we had said that was not for Metro New Orleans. That was for the areas outside of the levee system. East of New Orleans East, we're talking Venetian Isles. We've seen the high water, Lake St. Catherine and Fort Pike. Obviously, along the Mississippi coast, you're going to have the high water. There are no levees. You have a little sea wall, but you don't have any kind of a levee system. And then down to the south. And we know it doesn't take much to start funneling in the water from Terrebonne and Barataria Bay to get that water to start moving northward. And then again, outside of the areas that are protected by a bit of a levee system. And a camera that we have exclusive to us that we're looking out live at Gulfport on our hurricanetrack.com site. It's just amazing the water that has been coming up over the little park out there and riding up onto the roadway, and we are expecting that the water will continue to rise. Again, as the storm moves inland, we're still going to see that southerly push, so we're not going to see the water recede very quickly. It might take another couple of days before the water finally starts to recede. We're also looking at some of the river heights on the North Shore and in the Mississippi. They are going to be higher from a bit of surge, but also from the higher rainfall amounts that we're expecting. And again, the wind is not really going to be helping that water start to flow back out. It may take another few days before the water finally is able to drain back into the lake and Gulf waters, and we start to see those river levels coming down. Wind was never really an issue with this storm. And check out the Gulf winds. These are from some of the buoys and also oil rigs that are basically right near the center of the storm. South Pass rig, winds of 14 miles an hour, and this is not far from the center of the storm. Main Pass, 17-mile-an-hour winds. Just to the east of the mouth of the river, winds have only been at 5 miles. You can clearly see from the wind direction that broad circulation, but in terms of wind speeds, that really has not been the issue. And in fact, as the storm moves inland, we're not likely going to see winds sustained above probably 35 or 40 miles an hour. So far, yes, it has been breezy outside, but we are able to kind of sustain winds of this strength in terms of any kind of damage. We have seen some pictures and video of trees down in parts of the area. A lot of those tend to be some of the older trees that you get a fairly decent wind gust of maybe near 30 plus miles an hour, and you tend to see some of those trees go down. And obviously the winds will continue to increase as we go into the late night and overnight period as the storm starts moving inland. But in terms of sustained 40 plus mile an hour winds inland, that does not really look to be the case. Winds right now on primarily our lakefront and coastal locations have been ranging anywhere from around 10 to near 30 miles an hour. Maine passes them a little bit higher with some higher wind gusts. But as I mentioned, aside from our coastal areas inland, wind is not really much of an issue. This is our forecast of some of the wind speeds that we can expect. And as I mentioned, we are going to see those winds increasing, and kind of interesting to see the little center of the storm moving northward. As we get into tomorrow, we ought to still see windy conditions, but they should start to subside a bit, especially as we go into Tuesday. And it may not be until Tuesday, Wednesday that we start to see some of that higher water begin to finally retreat back into the Gulf waters. Again, with a sustained wind coming out of the southeast or south, that water just has nowhere to go. It cannot drain back into the Gulf. So it won't be until we start to see a wind change direction that that water level starts to lower again. So what we're looking for the night tonight, more heavy rainfall overnight and going into Monday. Precisely where that happens, it's starting to look like for tonight, more into the Mississippi coast and onto the North Shore, perhaps tomorrow across more southeast Louisiana, and I mean more the metro area down toward the coast. We will see where those set up. So prepare for the heavy rainfall. We're going to have to watch and see where those bands start to set up, and also a risk of maybe some small, again, weak tornadoes that start to develop as we have the kind of overall broad circulation around the storm. You will begin to see some small tornadic storms developing. So we will get new information on Cristobal at 4 o'clock. And we're going to be continuing to monitor what any changes there are. Hopefully, we kind of see that forward speed pick up again. Does look like it is moving right now. It is just very slow at the moment. Remember, the forward speed for the better part of more than 24 hours had been about 12 miles an hour. Since earlier this afternoon, that has come down to 5 miles. So it is kind of at a crawl at the moment. Well, we should see that forward speed start picking up soon.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. Of course, in Orleans Parish, we're always wondering and worrying about the pumps. Will they keep up? Let's talk to, we've got Dave, I think, joining us now. David Hammer joining us, part of our Down the Drain team. What are you thinking?
Good afternoon, Karen. Yeah, we're out here at the lakefront by Canal Boulevard where it meets the lake, and the pumps seem to be keeping up for now. Also, as Chris Franklin was just describing, we have these bands of rain that are coming through. We just got through another one. Then there was one about 30 minutes before that where the wind and the rain really kicked up. And I talked to Derek Bowes at the Flood Protection Authority just about 30 minutes ago, and he was telling me that the rain and wind coming from the north and across Lake Pontchartrain has caused the lake level to rise a little bit to about 3.8 feet. Previously, it had been about 3.6, so it's only rising slowly. And as you can see also over my shoulder here, the area between the hurricane protection system levees and the lake has started filling up. It's probably 3 feet at this point, maybe higher. We have seen it go down slightly because you can actually see there's some garbage that's gathered along the edge of the toe of the levee. And this has been the way that it looked maybe during Hurricane Isaac. So people in this area have been comparing this a lot to what they saw during Hurricane Isaac. And as Chris Franklin described, it has slowed down and kind of sat over us and not moved as quickly as it had been. Now I've got Rob Smith here. He's a New Orleans resident who likes to come out to the lakefront when it's not like this. And now you're coming out here when it starts kicking up with these weather events. What do you think of it so far? How does it compare to other ones you've seen?
I mean, this is the first that it's been like this. This is the first that I actually came out here and seen it like this, though. But it's amazing because I get to come out and see how the parking lot get flooded and just experience the whole New Orleans. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So usually you hang out here on the lakefront, just chill, and now it's filling up with water where you usually hang out.
Right. So like I said, I used to come out here like not often, but like when I won't go have free time and stuff like that, just walk on the side of the levee. But this the first I seen it like this, so it's amazing because there ain't no parking lot. So we really got to walk and just walk and see like, oh, there's a lot of water, you know what I'm saying? So I really ain't doing no tripping. I'm excited, to be honest with you.
That's great. Yeah, have you looked at something like this before? Were you here during Hurricane Isaac, for instance?
I was here during Hurricane Isaac, but I didn't come out here physically.
Yeah. What made you decide to come out here today to check it out?
I mean, just to get out the house, just to see like, well, look, let's go on the canal. I actually had a friend that told me to come out here with him.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, I'll come out here with you just to see the water and stuff, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we haven't seen as many people, and of course we've been shut in because of COVID concerns and things haven't been open and, during the coronavirus. So maybe that was part of the motivation, is to get out of the house after all this quarantine, right?
Right, but a lot of people think by reopening up the state and stuff like that, you're still gonna catch it. But you see me, I like to open, I like the free open, I like to go out there and just experience. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I hope the state open back up soon, because you can a lot more people can come out and see more. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So it'll be good.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate your input. So you have a good day too, Rob. So we're going to keep monitoring those lake levels, make sure that it doesn't rise too high. It's a slow moving storm, so those can add up, and we'll also keep our eye on the Sewerage and Water Board internal system. On the other side of this levee is where you're going to have potential issues if the pumps can't keep up, and right now they appear to be. So for now, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you so much, David Hammer. All right, we want to take a look at some posts we're seeing on social media. Of course, we're monitoring those along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. This is Robert Norman here. This is his post. It's 2 drone photos he took at Beach Boulevard and Lafitte Drive in Waveland. This is multiple feet of water at Terrence Avenue and Arlington Street. Again, this is us watching along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And we've heard in Hancock County, they have at least 250 streets that have seen water. The good thing is these are streets that typically flood, so residents in the area seem to know what to do with their cars, how to stay safe during this, but you can see some really high water here. This person, oh, it's Chef Kev, says he's fishing for garbage cans. He's always fishing or doing something. And lids, he says it's a whole different kind of fishing than he's used to. He's got some really high water there. We spoke with him earlier this morning, and he said that he was staying safe in Hancock County as well. All right, well, we do want to check in Mississippi. We have a reporter live there. Erica Ferrando has been there for a couple of hours now. Let's check in with her and see what's going on. And I know you saw a lot of water since you've been up there. Hey, Erica.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of water. We have been seeing a lot of flooded streets, but kind of like you said, these are streets that they kind of expected to flood because they're in those lower areas. But the good news is that those houses that are along those streets are mostly raised, so they don't expect any of those houses to take in water. We've kind of made our way from Waveland to Bay St. Louis, and this is actually the Washington Street Pier, and you can see this parking lot. Obviously, all this water has kind of just made its way onto this parking lot, and it is pretty windy out here, but that is of course to be expected since we are right along the Gulf. You can see there's kind of a line of cars out here as well that it basically just looks like a lot of people coming out here to kind of look at everything. But look at this little I want to show you this picnic area over here. It definitely looks like this picnic table is not where it's supposed to be, so kind of looks like that water is obviously washing away some of the different things out here. There are some kayaks out here. It looks like someone's actually trying to move these kayaks out here. We've seen those. They've been kind of floating there for the last 30 minutes or so. It looks like someone came out trying to move those, obviously get them out of this area. But yeah, we're getting some heavier rain, some heavier wind than we saw a little earlier. Now I want to take you down this way where we get closer to the pier, which it looks like from here that the pier is actually underwater. I don't think you can actually drive all the way down this street right here. But according to my map, this is the Washington Street Pier in Bay St. Louis. You're just seeing quite a few people kind of, looks like they're just taking pictures, kind of checking out what's going on. But you can really see where the water is kind of pushing up against this wall right here. And looking at all of this, you can see how the wind is pretty heavy. Not too heavy to where we feel like we're in danger or anything like that, but it is a little heavier than we experienced earlier today. So at the last check, there were still about 250 streets flooded in Hancock County. But the people who live along those streets have moved their cars. So we were driving down Highway 603 earlier, and there were just cars lined up all along the highway so people could get their cars to higher ground, obviously, so that their cars don't take in any water. So I want to show you this over here, this picnic area I was just talking about. Kind of gives you an idea of how high the water's coming up right now. But again, after speaking with some county leaders out here, this is kind of what they expected to see. Obviously, with any sort of tropical system, people who live out here say this is what they see for, you know, any tropical storm. Of course, it's even higher for any serious hurricane that brings in a lot of rain. So it's raining relatively hard right now, but I wouldn't even consider it a downpour. We're definitely getting soaked in water and experiencing this wind out here. But you know, this is kind of what we expected to see, I think, in this area. All right, so I want to take you, no cars coming, so I want to take you to look down this street right here. And I'm not sure how far down you can see, but there is a pier all the way at the end of this street here. And it does look like you can see water is crossing this road. So we're gonna continue kind of making our way down. We may head into Harrison County now and check conditions over there. We were in Waveland just a little while ago, and along Beach Road was completely covered in water in Waveland. Of course, the road here in Bay St. Louis isn't right along the beach like it is in Waveland. So the road here is still drivable. But I think we're gonna head over the bridge and kind of see what the conditions are on in the next county over. And but anyway, that's the latest. And if you take a look over here, I want to show you this water, obviously picking up a little more wind and energy as it's pushing up against the wall over here. So that's the latest here in Hancock County. I'm Erica Ferrando. Let's toss it back to y'all in the studio.
All right, Erica, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And Erica has been kind of all over that Mississippi Gulf Coast area, and most of our crews are roving around. Let's check in on Tan Trung now, who's in Manchac.
Karen, we are roving, and as you mentioned, we are in Manchac right now. Specifically, we're right next to Middendorf, so we're kind of teasing ourselves while also working, because I think many of us would rather be inside Middendorf's right now. And they're actually still open. I just checked in with Middendorf's. They said they're going to stay open till 4 o'clock, and I think that sort of tells the story around here, because this storm is more of a nuisance storm, and the rain that we're feeling and seeing right now is more of a nuisance rain. We did, as we traveled from St. John Parish earlier coming into Manchac, we did drive through a couple of squalls, and right now it seems like the wind is coming from the north, so it's pushing a lot of the water that you're seeing in front of us back. But there is a good amount of storm surge just kind of making its way in. But again, the wind is coming from the north and pushing it back. And Middendorf's itself in the past has flooded several times, so they actually went ahead and created their own portable flood barrier, which they tend to move around and kind of place in and around this area when there is a good amount of flooding happening here. But Middendorf's right now, their story is they're hurting because of the pandemic, these shutdowns. I just checked in with the general manager a little while ago, and they said, you know, it's been terrible since the pandemic. They had a good weekend during Mother's Day, but business has been spotty ever since. So it's tough going around here. But as for the storm, they're not very worried about it. We had a couple of people driving in here asking if Middendorf's was open. So people do feel safe enough to drive. Obviously, that is a personal decision. Many parish leaders are urging people to stay home. We did see one sheriff's deputy car parked here, kind of just patrolling and making sure people aren't doing and going into places that they're not supposed to. But again, you know, the squalls that we drove through were heavy at times, but at this point, we're seeing more of the wind. The rain is not very heavy, but because of the wind coming in from the north, it seems like it's a much more dramatic scene, but it's really just at this point a nuisance rain, getting into some of those areas in our rain pants that we don't want them to, but nonetheless, that's part of storm coverage. But for the most part here in Manchac, it's very quiet. Many people are going about their business. In St. John Parish, everything seemed to be okay as well. Those areas, those low-lying areas, especially north of I-10, the parish president there, Jacqueline Hotard, said those are fairly kind of in place and always preparing for flooding because that's what they see during these storms. But also, even when the wind shifts east and some of the water from the lake blows in, they'll get good flooding here. But in Manchac right now, this is the scene. We're kind of taking in what is typically a just nice storm scene, if you can call it that, because it's very humid right now. We have wind. but there's really nothing in terms of what we're seeing of a storm surge. It's not massive. Again, everybody's kind of taking it calmly here. Middendorf's will stay open till 4 o'clock, and they have a few customers in there. But again, the story for them is not really the storm. It's the kind of storm of kind of losses that they've had because of the pandemic. And just as I say that we're not really seeing a ton of rain, we're getting a bit more rain right now. So the squalls are moving in, and this is sort of the unpredictable nature of this storm that we talked about earlier. Some of it's kind of wobbly, and because as the forecasters have told us that, you know, we're on the wet side of the storm, much of the metro area is, especially on the North Shore. So we're going to be seeing a good amount of rain, but it's been intermittent. So we didn't have much rain earlier, but now it seems like we're coming through a squall at this point. But it's, again, nobody's getting blown over, and as you can see, the flags aren't really flying that fast. But because of the rain that's coming in now, it's a bit heavier than it started when we first broadcast or started this live shot a little while ago. But that's the story here. We're getting wet next to Middendorf's, Karen. What can we say?
Ton, here's what I'm going to tell you. You talked for about 6 straight minutes, and all I heard was that water was getting into your rain pants, and that's why I love you, that you would share something like that.
Yes, I'm glad that you paid attention.
And you see, I'm always listening. Ton, you are a storm veteran. So, I mean, I think I kind of got it from your tone, but for perspective, you know, we're this is the beginning of the hurricane season. As a generality, this isn't much, right?
No, and that's a sense that I got from a lot of people. Again, you know, you'll go along kind of certain areas in St. John Parish. When we moved into St. John Parish earlier, there were many places that just seemed like a ghost town, but that's hard to say between the pandemic and people staying home or whether that's because of the storm. But then we made our way along Airline Highway in Laplace, and it was busy. So people kind of felt confident enough that this is a storm that they could handle. We talked to the parish presidents. He said, yes, it's unfortunate that we're dealing with a named storm this early on in June, but you know, all the pumps are working. They've seen this before. And I think anybody that's been through a storm that goes from parish presidents to parish residents, I mean, you know where the levels of caution are. Obviously, for every storm, you have to kind of take precautions, but this one, again, seems more of a nuisance. If it was something more dramatic, I can guarantee you that no businesses would be open. And certainly the couple that I spoke with that drove here from Hammond over here to Manchac to go get their thin fried catfish. I suggest the thick fried, actually. I really like the thick fried. But, you know, they came here, they asked me if it was open, and then I walked in and checked, and they said they're open till 4. So, you know, again, this early on, nobody wants to see a named storm. But I think because we're seeing this is kind of good preparation to know what may lie ahead. And you know, storm season can be unpredictable, but you know, as we kind of progress through the pandemic and into hurricane season, so if we kind of get this practice round under our belts, we can kind of understand what may lie ahead and how we can prepare for it. Karen.
Ton, you are the greatest. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Live from Manchac. And it is now 3:32. We are bringing you continued coverage of Tropical Storm Cristobal.
That's right. We had confessions of rain pants, catfish recommendations. It's time for some more information. Devin Bertolotta is joining us with the latest from the studio. Hey, Devin.
Hey, Sheba. The Southeast Flood Protection Authority says it was ready for the storm. Right now, of the 68 floodgates that it maintains, 5 were closed today and 22 remain open. CLECO is reporting small clusters of power outages on the North Shore. The biggest is a group of about 400 homes off of Gause Boulevard and Westminster Drive. Some of the worst flooding we've seen so far is in St. Bernard Parish, where our Paul Murphy took this video. Many roads, as you can see in that parish, are covered by water, and the Delacroix levee has been breached. Some colleges are making adjustments. Delgado Community College is closing campus tomorrow, asking employees and students to stay home in light of the weather conditions. Don't forget, you can keep up with all the developments in the tropics with our WWL TV app. It is free to download in the App Store. You'll find updates from our weather experts, along with live satellites and radars.
All right, guys, we want to thank you so much, Devin. We want to check in on the situation in Venetian Isles. We want to get to our Megan Key now, who's on Chef Mentor Highway. She's headed there, and we now know that Venetian Isles is under a voluntary evacuation order. Hi, Megan.
Hey, yes, Venetian Isles is under a voluntary evacuation order at this time. And as you can see, this is the reason why we're here on Chef Mentor Highway. And as you can see, part of this road has been completely cut off by water, inundated by water. You'll notice there is a SUV quite a ways down. That truck happened to just keep going through this area. Seemed to stall for a bit, but it's still on its way. Now, I did speak with some people who were headed this way on their way to work, on their way to visit family, and they just were not able to get any farther. They had to turn around. As you can see, this water here is very deep, and you can't tell just how deep it is. But I want you to take a look to your right, and you'll notice a car stalled right over there on the bank on the side of the highway here. And it kind of just, it does give some context as to how high this water is here. Now, I did speak with somebody in this area who was driving a much higher truck, and he said at one point here when he was on the road that he opened his car and water actually came into his car, and that's when he knew it was just too high and had to turn around. It looks like there is another truck right here that's about to try to make that trek through the water here. Now, this truck does have bigger tires. Going through this area here, but it's, you know, that's not the best idea with just how deep we're seeing that this water is here. But some cars are making it all the way. A lot of people, though, still turning around. If you take a look behind me, you'll notice these cars on this side just stalled. Everybody's kind of waiting around, not able to move any farther. But as you can see, we're still dealing with this water over here, this situation, flooding in this area. And this is something that we'll continue to cover, and we'll be out here talking to more people who have been in this area having to deal with this flooding here. Reporting live in Venetian Isles, Megan Key, Eyewitness News.
All right, Megan, thank you very much. And from New Orleans East, we're going to go further east to St. Bernard Parish and check in on Paul Murphy.
Yeah, Karen, we are here on the Florissant Highway, and that way is Wyclowski and Shell Beach. As you can see, the parish has installed a rock dam here to keep the water from inundating Highway 46. And I am here with St. Bernard Sheriff Jimmy Pullman, who's been traveling the parish. Can you give us sort of a lay of the land? How are things going here in the parish with the storm?
Well, the biggest problem is right where we are in the eastern part of the parish. We're having a big problem with tidal flooding. None of us expected this type. As a matter of fact, we just had to add more rock to this dam to keep the water out because it was coming up so high so fast. You know, thinking of a storm that's carrying, you know, maximum 50 miles per hour wind, to think that it can push this much tidal water up here makes us really concerned. If it was a hurricane, particularly a slow moving 1 or 2, it can be big problems for us. But throughout the rest of the parish, we've been lucky with the rain banding, not much of it. So we all secure up there, but we are prepared to deal with localized flooding as well in the rest of the parish.
And so what are some of the areas that your office is keeping a pretty close eye on right now?
Well, right now it's down here in the eastern part of the parish, but the rest of the parish is covered. We have pre-staged barricades for the areas that's mostly problematic for localized flooding. So in the event we was to get any type of heavy rains up there, we prepared to deal with that as well.
Now, I drove the highway down to Delacroix not too long ago, and when I first drove down there wasn't a whole lot of water, just a little bit, but coming back, there's a flow there, and I guess your office has recently closed that road to traffic.
Yeah, at some point it just becomes too dangerous for anybody to travel. Now, this storm catching us by surprise in terms of the tidal flood, not just us, but the people who have stuff. I guess they thought they would have more time to get their stuff either lifted up or moved out of the area. So, you know, we're dealing with some of that as well. But, you know, safety first. I rather, you know, deal with property problems and have to go out there and actually deal with life-saving issues.
And what assets do you have at your disposal to go back and get folks who may be flooded out and can't make their way out on the highway?
Currently, we have our high water fleet down here. We consist of some Humvees and a large truck that can carry a large amount of people. But even at that, some point it becomes too dangerous to even operate those vehicles. So that's why we always preach, particularly outside the levee protection system. If you don't need to be down here, try to get out a little early and save everybody a lot of trouble. But we do have vehicles and including airboats if we have to respond to emergencies, and it's safe enough to do so, we will.
Has this area been declared under a curfew or anything like that?
No, not at this point. It's my understanding the parish president, who's been down here all morning, had called for a voluntary evacuation outside this levee protection system. They don't have a lot of people who actually live down this way, and we hope that they leave. But you have people that have a lot of recreational camps and things as such, and they've been trying to come down to check on their camps and all. But at some point, it just is not practical to let them down there.
And kind of talk about that, the history being the best teacher. Most of these camps, most of these houses are well above whatever flooding we may see, even if there's a 4 to 6 foot storm surge.
Yeah, and that's true. You know, the camp itself is safe, but a lot of people keep a lot of stuff under those camps, and it's a big task, and especially in a short notice to go down there to try to move all those things, and that's what they've been doing the last couple of days. A lot of them pull campers out, boats out, and they all park on side of the road, up the road, outside the inside the levee protection system. But sometimes, they late getting down here, and you can see what happened. You got close to 3 feet of water on the roadway, and it's just simply not passable safely anymore.
And Sheriff, any final words for your constituents, people you protect and serve here in St. Bernard Parish?
Yeah, we on top of it. Parish government's doing a wonderful job as well, and we're gonna say throughout this event, we're gonna make sure that your property is safe, and we're gonna make sure that you remain safe as well.
And the worst could come after dark, you think?
It depends, and if the storm does anything crazy. We was concerned as much as the tidal flooding with rain, and we didn't get quite as lucky with the tidal flooding, but we've been pretty lucky with the rain so far. But it's something that you can't say it's over until it's way out of here, and then we'll be here.
Thank you very much, St. Bernard Sheriff Jimmy Pullman, here in the Florissant area as we watch the tide rise here in Lower St. Bernard Parish. Now back to you in the studios, Paul Murphy reporting.
Now let's head north to St. Tammany Parish, where we've got Doug Mouton standing by in Madisonville. Hi, Doug.
Yeah, hey, Karen, and look, I'm not that far from where Ton is in Manchac, and let me just say, re-cue everything Ton said, because it's all true, and it's all pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I will say within the last hour or so here in Western St. Tammany Parish, we're in Madisonville. That's the Chifuncta River, one of the quintessential flooding spots that we see. Every time there's a storm, it's the Madisonville Bridge to your left. As you look, that's a common spot where water builds. I will say in the last hour, and now we're in a lull now, we have seen more consistent rain. We have seen gusts get a little bit stronger, but to say that it's been a lot of rain or that it's been very strong would certainly be an exaggeration. But we have certainly seen an increase, and we can feel that the storm is getting a little bit closer to us. And I do want to say this, and I'm walking through the water. You talk about storm veterans, one of the worst moves of all time. I threw out my storm shoes last year and forgot to buy new ones. So now I'm wearing old tennis shoes. My socks are drenched. I'll be just fine. All right, I will say this. The Chifuncta River right now is about an inch or two from jumping the banks here in Madisonville, but I want to say that happens all the time. It is not uncommon for the water to get over the banks, to get up on this grass, to get into the shells, to even get into this street. It's not problematic. It goes back out, and we're not even jumping the banks yet. But I will say the water is up at least a foot from where it was at 12:30 this afternoon. I took a little video out here, and it is much higher now than it was then, but this is definitely not problematic. What is interesting as you watch the water is it is running straight south. That's how you can still tell the winds are coming out of the north, blowing the water straight south, which is also what is keeping the Mandeville lakefront, which we showed you a couple hours ago, keeping that dry for now. As long as the winds are blowing towards the south and not blowing north, the Mandeville lakefront is going to stay dry as well. Now, we do expect, as the storm gets closer, for those winds to shift around. It would not be surprising at all if the water would jump the banks here. And again, unless it goes crazy, it's not problematic. And it certainly, at this point in the day, doesn't look like it's going to be problematic. The Mandeville lakefront will be watching later this afternoon to see how it plays out when the winds do shift around. But for now, Ton's call of a nuisance rain and nuisance wind is exactly what we're feeling in Western St. Tammany Parish. That's the story here. Reporting live in Madisonville, Doug Mouton, Eyewitness News. Karen.
Yeah, a very nuisance storm. We're actually, I believe we just got in our 4 p.m. update. Yeah, we did. It has not updated yet. It's not on the screen? Forward speed is 7, according to Chris. So it has sped up 2 miles per hour. Now, what'll be interesting as this updates, hopefully it'll update within the next couple of seconds. We're likely going to see the center more over here, I do believe. Now, it's still that broad circulation we've been identifying, but it wobbled earlier. When it slowed down, these broad, unorganized systems are more likely to wobble, and that's what it did. And it looked like it wobbled kind of around over towards the mouth of the Mississippi, which, of course, means we're starting to see some northerly winds or northeasterly winds, maybe in New Orleans, going over towards the bayou parishes, which means storm surge still kind of elevated down towards Port Fourchon and the Grand Isle area, but you might see more of a northerly wind, which would help. But still seeing that strong onshore flow all the way up St. Bernard Parish into Lake Catherine. Of course, we've still got some winds coming in the lake, and we still have the storm surge problems on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. That's where we're seeing most of the storm surge problems, kind of up here where it's funneling into the Sounds and right along the Mississippi Gulf Coast going into the Lake Bourne, Lake Catherine, Venetian Isles. Area. So that's what we're looking at this afternoon. I was really hoping that would update with the 4 p.m., but it looks like we might have to come back to it. So the track will update any minute now. Like I said, we'll probably see it more over here, I think, and then that could shift the track. It'll be interesting to see what their thinking is on that. But I'll show you what I'm talking about on satellite here. We've got the spin, and you can see here, you're probably actually seeing some sunshine in here, maybe along the coast. And this is not an eye, but it's a broad circulation, right? So earlier we were watching the broad circulation. Within it, there's a little vortice, which is just these little areas of spin. And what it did was it started here, it rounded the base as it stalled out, and as it lifted back to the north, now we're starting to see a little bit more movement with the system moving north at 7 miles per hour. So it hasn't stalled, that's the good news, but it's certainly not speeding through the area. But as long as you remain on the east side of this system, kind of in here, we're still seeing circulation inward and seeing inland rotation or flow off towards the Mississippi coast, but maybe seeing more of an offshore flow down towards Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes. So that's good news there because you want offshore flow when you're dealing with surge problem. Let's back up here and see. Okay, it hasn't updated, but we'll come back to it in just a little bit and get you the latest. Has it come in yet, Chris? No. Okay, we'll wait for it. But here's what we got the latest on radar. Most of the rainfall still kind of north of the lake. Course, kind of away from the center, what we've been talking about, and you've got all the heavy rainfall now still on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. They've just been getting hammered. Actually, the emergency management director, Rupert Lacey, told us in our chat earlier that they've shut down MDOT, or MDOT has shut down Highway 90 from Bay St. Louis all the way to the Ocean Springs Biloxi Bridge, which is Harrison County, by the way. So they continue to see storm surge inundation there, and it is getting to the roadways, which means in some spots it's over 5 feet of inundation, which is on the high end of what we were forecasting for the storm surge. But that's what happens when you get that strong onshore flow like that. I've been getting pictures of past Christian locations. We've shown you Waveland, of course, seeing some inundation, which is fairly common there, and then the Shell Beach spots as well. I did check this Shell Beach tidal gauge before I came on air. It was up to 7.5 feet. That's above ground level, so quite significant. And it just goes to show you of how vulnerable we are, and we know this, how vulnerable our area is to storm surge. I mean, this is a weak, unorganized tropical storm that is not organized at all, that is causing storm surge over 7 feet in some locations. That's unheard of in some parts of the United States, but that's just something we have to deal with here. And you get that funneling effect is why. Now on the north, or on the lake shore, on the south shore here in New Orleans, of course, we're seeing more of that northeasterly wind now that the storm is kind of due south and maybe even a little bit southeast of town. So you're seeing those winds wrap into the lake, and it's pushing that water towards the Lakeshore Drive. Of course, a lot of that area is underwater. Tides did get up to around 3.8 feet of surge right there on the south shore. Now, north shore, Doug was just talking about, it didn't look bad up there other than some showers. And that's because you still have more of a northeasterly to easterly wind kind of pushing the water away. So as long as that's the case, you're not going to see a huge rise on the north shore until we start to see more of a southerly wind. most of it on the South Shore as we currently speak. So a closer look at things. Here's some of those tropical downpours, and these are very heavy rainfall makers. Even though it's yellow, they're very heavy. Tropical raindrops are a lot smaller, and it can kind of be deceiving when you're looking at radar, but these are very torrential downpours moving through the area. Fortunately, we've kind of seen some breaks here and there, but it's looking like it might become a little bit more persistent, especially on the North Shore. And that's where we're more focused on flooding this afternoon and evening. South of the lake, a little bit more spotty. Some showers still moving through New Orleans, but notice they're very small and they're kind of hit or miss. And then there's kind of a line of showers continuing to move into Lafourche Parish. Raceland, you're about to get some showers, or you're getting one. And then even down towards Lower Jefferson, Plaquemines Parish is looking dry. St. Bernard Parish is looking dry, other than the storm surge that we continue to deal with. The Mississippi coast, we were talking about it. You're getting the rain, you're getting the surge, and that's going to continue as we watch this fetch of moisture down into the Gulf of Mexico continue to ride up around the outer circulation of Tropical Storm Cristobal. You can see here there is still plenty of it. It's still slow moving, and we've still got quite a ways to go with this thing, but it's also wrapping around kind of on the backside. And while you don't really see much rain down here, there are showers even going down here. The radar just cannot go that far south, but satellite tells you those are rain clouds right there, and those will continue to wrap up into this as well. Hey, Chris, did we get, he's on the radio. I was going to say, did we get the 4 p.m. update? It just came in. It just came in. Okay. I'm going to step off screen here and go to that graphic so we can at least give you the 4 p.m. update while I have you here on air. And once again, we are kind of expecting maybe the center of that is kind of over closer to Plaquemines Parish. Wouldn't be surprised. It'll be interesting to see what they think. But forward movement now 7 miles per hour to the north, so it is still moving more of a northerly component. It'll update here in just one. There it is. All right. So winds, it has an increase in intensity. That's the good news. And we're not expecting this to. It's still that broad, somewhat a little bit more organized, but with it being broad, it's not going to be able to wrap up very quickly. So 50 mile per hour sustained winds, that's probably on the high end. Pressure's down 1 millibar, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's strengthened a whole lot. It's 65 miles south of New Orleans. And notice they have it right near Grand Isle. It looks like. So they're calling the circulation kind of on the outer side of this broader circulation, which is interesting. So this will continue to lift towards the north, probably getting into the New Orleans metro by this afternoon. Now, this isn't a hurricane, so you know, you don't expect an intense core of winds. You're not going to see an eye wall with this thing. So being closer to the center could actually be a good thing when we're talking about rain totals, because as I showed you, we were seeing those bands, kind of a gap and then more banding of that rain. So that could stay into the Mississippi rather than the New Orleans metro as this moves to the north. Now that's for tonight. We are going to be watching possibly more flooding potential as we go into your Monday morning. That's as we get those kind of tail end feeder bands. So the latest here, you can see there, it lifts off towards the north at 7 miles per hour, eventually getting into probably near New Orleans as we go later this afternoon. But of course, you know, you're not expecting an intense eye wall with this or anything. So our rain totals, the latest on that, it still looks like the North Shore and South Mississippi will pick up the most this afternoon. We're still calling for maybe 4 to 8 inches. And we have seen some locations get close to that 4-inch mark, but a lot of places still have a long ways to go before they get to this. But this is kind of the zone where we'll be watching for the heaviest rain this afternoon. But as we go into tonight, notice if you look at this graphic, it kind of details what we're going to be watching. See these little tails that kind of hang off here? Even up to here towards Alexandria. These are going to be those tail-end feeder bands that could move through tomorrow morning. So while we might not see much flooding potential here in New Orleans this afternoon, it may stay just to our north. We're not out of the woods yet, and maybe really all of the South Shore, because we'll have to watch those tail-end bands and see where they set up tomorrow. Where that happens, it's still too soon to say, and I know we've been saying that a lot, but feeder bands are very, very difficult to forecast. I'll show you what one of our models is thinking and see and show you kind of what we'll be watching as we go into tonight and tomorrow morning. Here's the rainfall continuing to push into South Mississippi and the North Shore. This is where we think the flooding threat is going to be highest this afternoon and evening, kind of outside of the center. The center is here right over kind of New Orleans as we go into 7, 8, 9 o'clock. Could certainly have gusty winds, though. Wouldn't be surprised if we see wind gusts, maybe 45, 50 miles per hour at times, especially right there on the lakefront where you don't have much friction. Now, as we go into the overnight period, here's the center of the storm lifting off to the north. You've kind of got this outer band kind of lifting off to the north as well. But still notice we're still getting a surge of moisture up out of the south. And a lot of times what will happen, you'll get a little tail on these systems. And with that, that's that band, that feeder band we talk about. And it could set up anywhere. And where it does set up will likely pick up some pretty decent rain totals. This model is showing something very similar to what it's been showing, kind of that tail end band setting up through South Mississippi, maybe through the New Orleans metro down towards Houma. So if this sets up tomorrow morning, notice this is 9, 10 o'clock, we could see the flooding threat kind of linger through tomorrow morning. So that's why we're not saying we're out of the woods yet. We're still going to have to watch this very closely, and we still have probably another 24 hours of kind of tracking this thing before we give you the all clear. Even through 11 a.m., notice it still kind of has that band through the area. Now, it's important to know that there's going to be a sharp gradient with most of this, meaning you could have, 10 inches of rainfall fall underneath this, and you go 20, 30 miles to the north, you're looking at maybe 2 inches. So it's very difficult. It's just something we'll have to watch, and we just need to stay tuned for it really as we go throughout your Monday morning. The storm surge problems are still going to be along the Mississippi coast. We're talking 3 to 5 feet, which we're already seeing. We're already seeing over 3 to 5 feet along Shell Beach. Like I said, we've had tidal gauges get up over 7.5 feet at the Shell Beach location, which is right here. Not surprising, because what happens, of course, you get all that funneling, and then you get that funneling into Lake Bourne here, and the water has nowhere to go but up. So you see impressive totals. Same thing as you go into the Bay of St. Louis, and of course the lake 1 to 3 feet. 3 feet probably on the south shore now, because we're seeing more of that northeasterly wind. But you could see more of a northerly wind as that storm moves through later tonight. Of course, the Mississippi River, not really worried about it. It could see a little bit of a crest later on, but your 7-day forecast, once we get past tomorrow and the flooding threat ends, maybe a few showers and storms Tuesday and Wednesday, much drier into the latter part of the week, but boy, it is going to stay hot, lower 90s.
All right, thank you so much for that, Peyton, and so glad to hear that the storm is not gaining much intensity. We've been talking about a voluntary evacuation order for Venetian Isles. We want to get back to our Megan Key, who is on Chef Mentor Highway and monitoring the high water there. Hi, Megan.
Hey, yeah, we've had to stop in this area. As you can see, part of this road is inundated with water here on Chef Mentor Highway. We were trying to go farther into Venetian Isles, but we're unable to do so. As you can see, if you take a look to your right, you'll notice that car that's stopped and stalled on the side of the highway here. Now, we have seen a couple of vehicles make it all the way to the other side, but of course that's not recommended because we really don't know how deep this water is. I know when you get a little bit closer to the car stalled on the side, that water at least comes up to your knees, so it does get pretty high over here. Now, we're actually surrounded by water in this area. There's a wildlife refuge in this general area that has water all surrounding it, so that I'm sure that contributed to the flooding that we're seeing here. You'll notice a couple of businesses in this area where it doesn't look like anybody is. Now, we did speak with some people who were headed to work trying to get through this area, but of course with the flooding that you're seeing now, they were unable to do so. I also talked to a young man who was headed to see his mother when he heard about the voluntary evacuation, but he was unable to get there too because of just how high this water was. Let's take a listen.
It's pretty deep. I got almost to the bridge, the Wrigley's Bridge, and they had cars on the side of the road. It was going over the roof. So once I seen that, I opened my door. It was coming inside my truck, so I just turned around.
And so you were trying to get to your mom?
Yeah, my mom lives in Venetian Isles back there, so they got a 3-story house, so she should be all right. I mean, I opened my door, and when I seen it coming inside, I seen the water. It was pushing in, so I just turned around then. I didn't want it to go any worse, and my truck break down. I got my kids back here, so.
Was it kind of like a sneak?
Yeah.
You did not really see it?
Yeah, you can't see the street. I was staying in the middle of the street, and once I couldn't see that, I just turned. That was it. I turned around.
Now, as you can see, we're not even that far into the water, and this water already almost comes to the top of my rain boots. So that just shows you how high it does get, because it does get significantly higher the farther we go. But of course, we're going to continue to talk to people in this area who are leaving, evacuating, and also people who are still trying to get past this water and where they're heading. Reporting live on Venetian Isles, Megan Key, Eyewitness News.
All right, Megan, thanks very much. It is now 3:58. We're going to take a quick break. All right, it is now 4 p.m. and we are bringing you continuous coverage of Tropical Storm Cristobal.
That's right. We've been showing you how it's impacting our area, and Devin Bartolotta is following the latest news on the storm. Let's get over to her.
Sheba, we hope that everyone out there has stocked up on supplies that they might need. Winn-Dixie announced today that stores have changed their hours in light of the weather, and they are closing right now, 4 p.m. No word on hours tomorrow. A voluntary evacuation is in effect for areas not protected by levees in Plaquemines Parish. Pumping stations are operational, and the floodgate was closed last night. New Orleans City Hall is closed today and will remain closed tomorrow due to severe weather. Non-essential employees are not expected to report to work. CLECO is reporting a new power outage in Mandeville. Nearly 500 homes there are without power in the neighborhoods you see there highlighted near Florida Street and Albert. Don't forget, you can keep up to date with all the developments in the tropics with our WWL TV app. It is free to download in the App Store. You'll find updates from our weather experts along with live satellites and radars.
All right, Devin, thank you so much. We have been following posts on social media, and take a look at this. This is a water spout near Gulf Shores. This is some frightening video to look at here. It was apparently taken around 8:30 this morning. And again, this is a water spout near Gulf Shores. So I believe Chris is coming now. What's going on with this water spout?
Well, what kind of leading question is that? What's going on with it?
It's time for me to go home.
Can we tilt up on this camera, please? What setting
So
is this on?
demanding. Focus on the water spout, sir.
Okay, the water spout. We talk about this all the time. Landfalling tropical systems on the eastern and usually kind of the northeastern quadrant is where you're going to get little spin-ups, water spouts, or weak tornadoes. Usually, the tornadoes that do develop tend to be EF0, EF1, maybe. They tend to be very brief. They tend to give you almost no real warning time. So they kind of develop very quickly. They're almost just as fast, are gone by that point. So yeah, water spouts are going to be very, very common, really along the entire northern Gulf Coast, from not only Mississippi, but Alabama, and probably well to the east over the Florida beaches as well. And then as those move closer to the coast, we may see some other tornado warnings issued. We had a couple of earlier. Luckily, again, these tend to be very, very weak, but tornado, even EF0 or 1, is going to do some damage. The rotation around this has just been almost mesmerizing to watch. And I wanted to start, though, with our high-resolution satellite. And I was talking about this earlier. This actually takes a satellite image every single minute. So it's more real time than even radar is, which radar takes a couple of minutes to do a scan and you get an image. So this is about as real time as you can get. And it's just been mesmerizing to watch, again, what is a broad circulation, but these weak little vortices, in other words, other little spins embedded within the overall spin of the storm. This one has been moving up toward the mouth of the river. So a lot of folks have been asking, all right, well, according to the position of your icon in your graphic, it certainly looks like it has made landfall. Well, Hurricane Center is talking about the fact that there are two of those little vortices. They're really kind of splitting the difference right now. So though the official center is not quite on land, if you were to type in these coordinates in a kind of Google map program, it is still to the south of Grand Isle. But to be honest, for all intents and purposes, it has just about made landfall. Again, that broad rotation may be centered right over water, but overall, it is already moving on land. So the winds of 50, that's probably about as max as we're going to get. Movement, as I'd mentioned earlier, as Peyton mentioned earlier, has sped up slightly. Earlier, the forward speed was at 5 miles an hour. It has come up to 7. We'd like to see that probably doubled just to get it in and out of here a little bit faster, but at least it is moving. It's slow, but it is moving. But as I was talking about earlier, a lot of times when you have these exposed centers and you get these other little vortices to kind of rotate around that center, sometimes that pulls the storm back a bit. You don't see that fast forward motion, and that's exactly what happened. It kind of did slow down, and also with the interaction to land. When these storms start to near land, some crazy things can start to happen, and we did see the storm begin slowing down a bit. Heavy rainfall is still going to be our primary concern across the entire viewing area, precisely where those bands set up. Again, exactly where they set up, still very much an unknown. It does look more and more likely that at least through the evening and night, that focus is going to be on the Mississippi coast and continuing up onto the North Shore, as we've already seen in excess of 4 inches of rain in some spots. Now, is it going to be the entire Mississippi coast? Probably not. But in certain isolated bands, we may see in excess of 10 inches of rainfall before this is all said and done. And again, that rainfall continues up into St. Tammany. And now we're starting to see, notice, we're not getting quite as many of those breaks as we had earlier when you get that heavy round of rain, then a bit of a dry period, then another round of some heavy rain. We're starting to see this kind of fill in a bit. So now you're getting the constant rain. This is the training of the rain that we were kind of fearing that would lead to some flooding. That's also where you see your tallest thunderstorm development. You do not see those storms developing around the center of circulation. And we had been talking about that since really early this week. The fact that a landfall in southeast Louisiana is not necessarily a bad thing, because the heaviest rains are not going to be right at the center. They're going to be farther to the east. Was hoping maybe it would be farther to the east out of our viewing area. We don't wish those on anyone, but you have to look out for the folks in your viewing area. And we were hoping that maybe it would be even farther east, at least somewhere out east where they have some elevation and can kind of take those heavier amounts of rainfall. The one thing for us is we have no elevation, so the water has to go somewhere, and it tends to go into the streets. It fills up our canals, the rivers very, very quickly, and then it has to go somewhere. And that's going to be the fear on the Mississippi coast and possibly extending into into the North Shore. Even as we get into tomorrow morning and even tomorrow afternoon, as the circulation center is well up to the north, we are still on the wet side, the eastern side. So we are still in a position where the moisture and rainfall is being drawn up out of the Gulf of Mexico. So even during the day tomorrow, the storm is going to be in a position where we will still have some heavy rainfall. Maybe not quite as intense as the rains we're getting now, but certainly the potential of some flooding. And exactly where that sets up, once again, very much an unknown. Most of the heavy rainfall has been now starting to kind of get a little bit closer to that center of circulation. Still a very broad overall circulation with heavy rainfall. Again, this storm, Cristobal, was embedded within a much larger circulation. And that's where a lot of this rainfall, because the rain is actually from central Louisiana all across the Gulf of Mexico to Jacksonville, Florida, and into the Atlantic Ocean. So this is a huge overall broad circulation that is moving northward, and Cristobal cristobal finds itself just kind of embedded within that. Very heavy rainfall, and Peyton pointed out something that is worth noting. Sometimes you look at these greens and yellows and you think, well, that's not really heavy rainfall. That's kind of a moderate rain. It's not as though it's those bright red colors that we talk about, those intense downpours. Tropical rains are a little bit different. The water droplets are a little bit smaller, so sometimes these can be misleading. And these are, in fact, some very heavy downpours moving through Mississippi. And as I mentioned, we're not seeing those breaks in the rain like we had earlier, where we really did benefit from a heavy round of rain move through, and then you get a fairly decent break. I know just at my house, we get a heavy downpour, water level in the street would start to come up, the backyard would start to come up, then you get a bit of a break, and water was able to drain and clear out of the area. Then it was kind of primed and ready for another heavy downpour. We may not really see that coming up, as the heavy rain is now starting to kind of fill in along the Mississippi coast. And again, some of the totals that we have seen in Mississippi are running now in near excess of 4 inches. And we're going to add maybe another half a foot to that before the night is done, maybe even more than that. Again, it's kind of a rough estimate as to some of the totals that we will see. In the city, though, at least so far, so good. We get some brief downpours, and then we get a bit of a break, and then another downpour. So around the city, I think we're going to be okay for the night tonight. The focus tonight and for the next several hours is going to be on the North Shore or pointing that way, Mississippi, and then eventually onto the North Shore. From the city south, we will certainly still see some heavy downpours at times, but not the rainfall amounts that we could see along the coast. Some of the rainfall estimates are over 4 inches of rainfall. We actually did have an observation from Waveland that was near 4 inches, so we can kind of confirm some of these totals. As you get a little bit closer towards St. Tammany Parish, though, near Slidell, Pearl River, we're looking at about 2.5 inches. As you get north of that, not nearly as much. So we can kind of take or absorb some of that heavier rain on the more Florida parishes. South Shore, we have had some decent soakings, but also, as I mentioned, you get breaks in the rainfall. So you may have a storm that moves through with rainfall rates of 2 to 4 inches an hour, so very heavy, but then it moves on, and then you get a break, and normal drainage is able to kind of catch up, and then you get another downpour, and it hasn't been horrible. Again, we've still got a long way to go with this. Airport, these are official totals. These are not estimates. We have seen some decent soaking rains across the metro area, with now more than 1 inch of rain at Kenner. Already over 2.5 inches of rain downtown. This is at the heliport at the Superdome. Bogalusa, just over 3/4 of an inch, 1.13 at Slidell. So far, at least around southeast Louisiana, even parts of southern Mississippi, not excessive amounts of rainfall, but we're going to add to that over the coming hours. And as our computer model has indicated, we are starting to see more of those bands start to fill in. A lot of the focus, I do think, is going to be Mississippi North Shore. And then as the circulation starts to lift northward, notice we start to see more of the heavy rainfall kind of getting pulled in from the Gulf. Will one of those bands tomorrow be over the city? Will it be more over St. Bernard? Will it be more over the river parishes, or perhaps even out farther west and maybe more Baton Rouge? We still don't know, but it is definitely something that we're going to have to watch as we get overnight tonight, and especially early tomorrow. I think by tomorrow afternoon, evening. So what is today? Sunday? So within 24 hours or so, I think most of the heavier rainfall will be lifting northward, and we should finally start to see some improving conditions. Maybe not quite improving in terms of the higher water levels. That may be a little bit longer because we need the winds to shift for all of that water to start draining back out into the Gulf and lake waters. We are still under a high risk of flooding for the day today and through the night tonight. This isn't often that you see the Weather Prediction Center. Those are the folks within NOAA and the Weather Service that tend to focus on flooding type events. And it's not often that they place areas under a high risk. Now, it tends to be more common with landfalling storms, but certainly something that we're going to be watching for. As I mentioned, tonight it may be more Mississippi North Shore, and then tomorrow it may be more South Shore. Whether it's the river parishes or Metro New Orleans is yet to be seen. Rainfall estimates still 4 to 8+ inches. And notice our computer model still kind of highlighting more southern Mississippi, also a bit on the North Shore. And then as you get west, there's going to be a very tight gradient. As you get west of the circulation, rainfall amounts are not going to be nearly as much, and certainly not as much of a flooding issue. The dry air played a very big role in keeping this as a weak storm, but now that it is moving northward, we're not really looking at the dry air to play too much more of a role in the future of the storm itself. Storm surge, we've already seen from all of our live shots along the not only coastal locations, but those that are flooding from the lake. It has started to rise quite a bit. We may still see those numbers come up, or those levels come up another foot or two. We've been showing you this camera out at Gulfport, Mississippi, at one of the little state parks right along the Gulf, and we had kind of steadily all morning long been able to watch it approach that little seawall, which is a couple of feet, and then there's a beach. And then you have the kind of little green space here before the highway. And slowly but surely that water has been coming up. Now, the Weather Service is saying it does look like a lot of the Mississippi coast, we may have already seen kind of the peak because we've gotten a high tide, and it may not start to drop off right away, but it may not come up much more along the Mississippi coast. In parts of southeast Louisiana, it still might rise a little bit more before we start to see that water come down. Wind was never really a great concern. Anytime you have these storms, and certainly within some of the thunderstorms associated, you will get some gusty winds. Wind gusts are one thing. It's when you get those strong, sustained winds for a long period of time that you can get more widespread damage. And notice the buoys and oil rigs right near the center are not showing, as a matter of fact, not showing anywhere close to tropical storm force wind. So this was not ever really going to be a wind event, and certainly not much near the center of the storm. Even as it did start to organize a little bit, you started to see the rainfall kind of wrapping around the center. The winds never really did increase. And in fact, look, we have wind advisories in effect for areas of southwest Mississippi and southern Mississippi north of the coast where the winds are likely to increase. Sometimes as these storms make landfall, you kind of see the wind field expand out from the center. And it looks like that may be happening or expected to happen, and not really much of an issue as far as winds go across southeast Louisiana. Some of our coastal locations, winds have been gusting in excess of near 15 to almost 40 miles an hour, but sustained have been kind of in a 20 to 30 mile per hour range. And I think that's probably about as high as we would see even inland in terms of sustained winds. Our computer model indicating about that as well, with winds coming down this evening. Still on the breezy side during the day tomorrow, but again, kind of settling down. The wind, though, is not going to change direction. That's going to be favorable for seeing those water levels begin to drop because, as I mentioned, even as we get into tomorrow, we still have more of a southerly flow. Not as strong, but still that water is going to be getting kind of piled up along our shoreline and along the lakefront. So North Shore rivers, coastal locations, we're not going to see that water really start to drain until probably more Tuesday and into Wednesday. So we're watching for tonight. More heavy rain continuing tonight, overnight, and into tomorrow, probably through at least the early afternoon hours. A big question is going to be where those rain bands set up, because that is going to be where you get the real flooding risk. You know, we get a brief downpour of some heavy rainfall in the city and you get streets to flood. But the real significant flooding is going to be primarily in those areas where you see those rain bands set up, and also the risk of tornadoes. May not really see that risk here in the city, but certainly along the Mississippi coast where we have a tornado watch in effect right now, that might get shifted depending upon the track of the storm, kind of parts of the North Shore overnight tonight, again, depending upon exactly where this does move inland, and then the kind of the trajectory after that. So just a real quick recap of all the impacts that we're anticipating. Widespread 4 to 8 inches of rainfall, South Louisiana or Southeast Louisiana, southern Mississippi. A few locations could get over 10 inches of rainfall through tomorrow. Storm surge, we've already started to see the water coming up. In some spots along the Mississippi coast, it may have kind of peaked and then we'll start falling after tonight, tomorrow. Lakes, though, 1 to 3 feet. Coastal locations, 3 to 5 or more. I think the extreme would be the maybe 6 foot. Winds are going to be sustained. I think more likely 20 to 40 at the most, because we really have not seen any sustained winds nearing 50 miles an hour. And you are going to see some higher gusts at times. And again, a few tornadoes are going to be possible with the storm. Primarily, tornadic storms are going to be along the Mississippi coast, where you could see some water spouts move inland or some quick little spin ups even as those rain bands start moving in. And then maybe that shifting to parts of the North Shore as we start to see that rain band kind of filling in from the Mississippi coast up to the North Shore. Once again, coastal locations are always prepared for these events because of the just inundation of water with a strong southeasterly wind will start piling up the water. So coastal locations, you're already pretty much prepared for the storm surge threat. And again, if you're within the levee risk reduction system, this isn't an issue at all. The heavy rainfall, though, is going to be something that we're going to be closely monitoring throughout the rest of the night tonight and going into early tomorrow.
Okay, Chris, thank you so much. Of course, we are tracking Cristobal as it makes its way on land. I'm Katie Moore in the Channel 4 studios now with you throughout the night with Sharice.
Yeah, hey,
we're
Katie.
both here.
Yeah, we're both here. Sharice Gibson here standing by. Of course, we continue to track Tropical Storm Cristobal, and we are going out to Erica. She's been over in the Mississippi Gulf Coast for us, and right now, I think, Erica, you're over in Pass Christian. How is it looking in that area?
Yeah, we've just made it over here to Pass Christian, and we're actually on Highway 90 right now. And Highway 90 was just closed all the way from Bay St. Louis to Biloxi. So that's about 25 miles long that they have had to close down this major highway here. You can see where it's obvious. We have this lane blocked. Just look at that barricade. I'm not sure if it was actually standing before, but there's no way it would be standing with this rain. This is the strongest the wind has felt since we've been down here in Mississippi. I'm going to take you over here to look at the Gulf, because you can definitely see how strong the wind is. Can you guys hear me? I think we might have been having mic issues. Can y'all hear me now? Okay, great. So we are, like I said, we're here in Pass Christian. You can actually see the sun. We're just at the start of this town, and look how strong this wind is by just looking at these waves. This is the strongest we've seen it so far. We just actually got into Harrison County. We were in Hancock County all early afternoon. They had several streets flooded over there. There are also, of course, streets flooded. Ooh, sorry. We get a few big gusts of wind out here. Luckily, though, we're not really seeing too many people driving out in this area. But this is the strongest the wind has been since we've been out here today. This is actually just a parking lot right here. You can see this water kind of getting closer. It's not obviously flooded this road right here, but we do understand that farther down Highway 90, the water is starting to get up on the roads in Harrison County. We can't actually see that from where we are, but if you do look at Highway 90 right here, you can see that rain just kind of making its way over the road. That's kind of just a visual giving you an idea of how strong the wind is right now. And so I spoke with some people with emergency management over here in Harrison County. They said there are some roads, of course, that are flooded, but they're in those areas that they kind of expected to flood. They said a few homes have taken in water, but those are homes that they kind of expected to take in water. We're getting a little bit of a break from the heavy wind here. Let's see if we can get just a little bit closer.